the Sorcerer of the Celestial Dragon line. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 451, The Profligate Kid. Allen also practiced the spells of the prophecy school, but his purpose was not to check the future. Because he knew the principle of prophecy, Allen no longer used this spell. Sometimes your impromptu idea will mess up the future. Many spellcasters who are proficient in the spells of the prophecy school in history died from their own spells, because they believe from the bottom of their hearts that what they see is a future and ignore other influences. The spells of the prophecy school can see some fragments of the future, but not the complete future, but they can see the past. Allen's biggest purpose in practicing the prophecy school is not to predict the future, but to hide his past. He doesn't want people to know his details. If a powerful prophet sees that he is a time traveler and has a cheating device such as a chip, this is a big trouble. So after he learned the prophecy, he released a jamming spell on himself. That is, all predictions related to him will cause interference to the language. Destruction is always easier than construction, so unless the strength of the spellcaster is far higher than Allen, their prophecy will seriously deviate from the answer, or even fail to cast. Hello, Priest Akira. Allen nodded and said, "Powerful man from afar, what do you want to talk to me about?" Akira looked at Allen in front of her, but her heart was constantly churning. Just now, she used the prophecy to check Allen's past and future, but the spell failed inexplicably as soon as it was used. She keenly sensed that this person was not simple. "I want to get a map of the area around the rogue camp from you." Allen glanced at her and felt her movements just now, so Allen directly cast a spell to counter and interrupted her prophecy. This is a common problem of the prophecy school, like to be a charlatan. After studying the linguistic school, Allen likes to interrupt other people's prophecy. What he hates most is those who rely on the prophecy to pretend to be a charlatan. "A powerful wizard like me is still hiding. Why should I watch you pretending to be X as one of the senior officials of the rogue camp?" Akira had a lot of information in his hands, which was what Allen needed. After all, there were many differences between games and reality. For example, a task in the game asked you to save someone, and you could take as much time as you wanted, as long as the task was not over. But in the real world, if you went slowly, the person might have become a corpse. Maybe it was similar to the game in many places, but this was a real world. Okay. After carefully observing Allen for a while, Akira nodded and turned to walk inside. Allen raised his footsteps and followed. This is the map around the rogue camp, including the bloody wasteland, the boulder wilderness, the burial ground, etc., and the map to Lugaoyan. Akira took out a sheepskin scroll and handed it to Allen. "Thank you." Allen reached out to take it and took a look, then looked up and said, "In exchange, you can propose conditions. Money, equipment, and potions are all fine. We don't want these things, but we have a small request." Akira said lightly, "Tell me." Allen frowned slightly and then relaxed his brows. "I hope you can help us clean up some monsters. We are a little short of manpower." Akira said directly, "Okay, I will help you clean up the monsters." Allen was not surprised by Akira's request. Even if Akira didn't ask, he was ready to clean up the monsters. After all, those monsters would drop a lot of things: magic gems, potions, and runestones. After leaving the church, Allen was ready to go to the training ground to take a look. Just now he saw on the balcony that there was a large open space here, and many half-grown children were training here. These people should be training hard to become professionals. All children in this world must participate in this training, as long as they are healthy. These trainings will last until he is 16 years old. At the age of 16, there will be an awakening. If they succeed in awakening, they will become professionals. After failure, some people will join the army and become soldiers, and some people will become civilians. However, there are still some people who have not awakened, nor have they failed, but are in a semi-awakened state. These people are mercenaries, and rogue warriors are such semi-awakened warriors. They are not fully awakened, much weaker than professionals, but stronger than soldiers. Allen walked over to take a look, but just as he was about to walk over, a figure appeared in front of him. "Good day, respected sir. I'm glad to meet you in this remote place. I'm Kid, a good friend of all professionals." A fat man with a big belly and a big smile blocked Allen's way. "This sir is a little unfamiliar. Is this your first time to our oak camp? I'm the best merchant in the entire camp. I have all kinds of things that professionals need. Come in and have a look. There will always be something you need." Seeing that Allen did not refuse, this guy with a profiteer look kept trying to trick Allen and wanted him to come in. Allen still remembers Kid very clearly. In the game, Kid is a gambling merchant. He will put all kinds of black unidentified items on the shelf for you to gamble. Each time you spend 5,000 gold coins, you can buy one. The quality of these equipment ranges from the lowest level whiteboard equipment to the highest level dark gold equipment. Countless noobs who expect to get rich overnight have been deceived by this profiteer. More than 90% of the items on his shelf are white equipment, 5% are blue equipment, and the remaining gold equipment, green suits, and dark gold equipment have a shockingly low probability of being dropped. Allen took 50 million gold coins to gamble, and in the end he got a lot of white and blue garbage, only a few gold and dark gold equipment, and the attributes were terrible. Since then, Allen has always hated this guy, but he didn't expect that he would jump out as soon as he arrived at the rogue camp. And looking at his posture, he must have known that Allen didn't know he was a profiteer and wanted to make another fortune from him. Looking at Kid who was courting him, Allen's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. There is no way in the game, you can only rely on luck, but in reality, Allen, who has the eye of truth, can make you lose everything you win, even your underwear. After making up his mind, Allen pretended to refuse twice, but his attitude was not firm. After realizing Allen's intention, Kid would not give up and continued to deceive Allen to trick him in. Allen finally pretended to be reluctant and declined a few times. Finally, he followed Kid in. Chapter 452 Gambling on Equipment. This is a big house made of stone and wood. The house is solid and spacious. There are several shelves inside, and the shelves are filled with various equipment. However, these equipment are all black, and you can only see the appearance, and you can't see anything else. After entering the house, Kid's eyes flashed with a gleam, and then pointed to the equipment on the shelf and said, "Customers, feel free to choose whatever you need. All items are 5,000 gold coins." Allen looked at Kid with a smile, and then began to observe the equipment on it. Although Allen does not belong to this world, and does not have the ability of professionals in this world to see the attributes of items, he can feel whether the magic power on these items is strong or not. The powerful eye of truth can easily see through Kid's tricks. These equipments have no obstacles in Allen's eyes, and he can feel the strength of the weapons. Chip, scan these equipments, build a data information database based on the equipment here, and express the information of these equipments with data. Glancing at the dazzling array of equipment, Allen clearly felt the strength of these equipments, but it would be more accurate after the chip scan. A large amount of data quickly passed through Allen's eyes, and then the attributes of each piece of equipment appeared in front of Allen. Damaged hat, defense 7, durability 3/7, strength 11 required. Rough leather armor, defense 16, durability 12/18, strength 15 required. Poor dagger, damage 1-2-3, durability 5/5, strength 9 required. The equipment attributes in front of him emerged, and Allen took a look and had a new understanding of Kid's bottom line. This guy's definitely the biggest profiteer in the entire Diablo world. 5,000 gold coins can already buy 2 or 3 blue clothes with good attributes, and the most common here are these white clothes worth only a few dozen gold coins. There are hundreds of equipment on the shelf in front of him, and 99% of them are white clothes. The only blue suit is a leather armor, light armor, defense 21, durability 22/22, vision +1 when worn, strength 15 required. This blue suit only has +1 vision, which is the lowest level equipment. This thing can only be sold for a few hundred gold coins at most in a blacksmith shop, but here it is the most valuable among hundreds of equipment. Allen came to another shelf with an expressionless face and continued to check. After spending more than 10 minutes, Allen looked through all the equipment. Among the thousands of equipment in this room, Allen found 2 good equipment. These 2 pieces are gold equipment. In fact, there is also a dark gold equipment in this material, but the attributes are so rubbish that the attached magic effect is completely useless. One of the equipment is a longbow, ice longbow, 2-handed, damage 13 to 20, agility 18 required, strength 20 required, level 6 required, bow and arrow, fast attack, accuracy plus 22, frozen damage 6 to 9, plus 3 maximum damage bonus to undead creatures 100%, reduce the target's speed by 15%. This bow and arrow can be said to be a low level top grade. It doubles the damage to undead creatures, and there is also freezing damage. The deceleration effect is very practical. Allen remembered that there are many elite monsters in Diablo. The most of these elite monsters are resistant to fire, and some are even directly immune to fire. When Allen played before, the mage was directly an ice mage, which was quite powerful, and could freeze or slow down monsters. This weapon has a slowing effect and a high attack, so it can completely kite the monster to death. The other equipment is a light armor with high defense, plus 3 vision, increased recovery and attack movement speed, and restores some health after killing the enemy. It is also a top-notch item for novices. After observing, Allen took out 10,000 gold coins and took down the 2 equipment directly after finding no other equipment worth buying. The profiteer kid next to him was just happy about making a big profit, but in a blink of an eye, he saw the 2 equipment Allen picked up. He was naturally familiar with these 2 equipment because he placed them here specifically for the purpose of preparing for a gambling event for equipment. After a while, he was going to find 2 people to bet on these 2 equipment in front of everyone's eyes to promote his store, but who knew that they were actually chosen by this outsider? These 2 equipment are valuable and good things. In order to get them, he spent more than 100,000 gold coins. If Allen took them away, he would lose a lot. Without caring to put the gold coins away, Kid's fat body flashed and appeared in front of Allen. "What's wrong, boss kid? Is there anything else?" Allen knew what Kid wanted to do, but pretended to be surprised. This guest. Because the incident happened suddenly, Kid didn't know what to say. "Boss G, just say whatever you want to say. I have something urgent. My friend wants to kiss me to drink." Allen smiled, but his tone was full of impatience. It's like this, guest. These 2 pieces of equipment have some minor flaws. Would you consider changing them? I have dark gold equipment here," Kid said with sweat on his forehead. "Flaws? No. I think these 2 pieces of equipment are very suitable." Allen looked at Kid and felt refreshed. He was cheated of money by this fat profiteer in the past. This time he must get revenge. Although these equipment have no effect on him, I like them. After saying that, Allen was ready to leave. Kid wanted to stop him, but Allen rolled his eyes and said, "Why can't I take away the things I bought here, Mr. Kid? Do you want me to inform Sheriff Casher? Of course you can take it away. I'm a serious businessman." Hearing Sheriff Casher, Kid had no choice but to stop and watched Allen take away the 2 top quality equipment. Seeing Kid's expression, as if his parents had died, Allen was in a good mood. He put away the 2 pieces of equipment and continued to shop leisurely. However, after spending some time in Kid's store, the sky was gradually getting dark when he came out and the training ground was closed. Allen looked around and started to go back. When he returned to the hotel, it was already dark and the market had gradually dispersed. After returning to the hotel, he walked directly to the tavern opposite the hotel. The name of the bar is Oak Tavern, and it is also the only tavern in the rogue camp. As a luxury item, the price of alcohol is not cheap. Except for professionals, ordinary civilians rarely come here to drink, so most of the people in the bar are professionals or mercenaries. Gently pushing open the half-open door, Allen walked in. Chapter 453 Casher. Entering the bar, the air inside was obviously much more polluted, and noisy sounds rang in my ears. Compared with the somewhat cold environment outside, it seemed much warmer here. The air was filled with the strong smell of alcohol and the aroma of barbecue, and the ears were filled with the sounds of many people drinking and making noises. professionals seemed to be in a very good position, but in fact they were walking on the edge of death all day long, and they didn't know when they would die in the hands of the devil. The tavern often provided a place for professionals to vent. "Hi, Allen, here. A loud voice sounded, and Allen turned his head and looked over. It was Carter. "Come on, sit down." Seeing Allen coming, Carter pointed to the reserved seat and said, "Sir Allen is here for the first time at the rogue camp. Let's toast him together." As he spoke, he raised his glass with the other members of the team. Allen hurriedly politely raised his glass as well. The group drank a glass of wine and then sat down again. There were not only professionals in the tavern, but also a large number of mercenaries. Allen saw many rogue warriors who patrolled during the day, also drinking here. Seeing Allen's gaze, these rogue warriors boldly cast a wink at Allen. The wine tasted good. Most of the professionals were rich, so the wine was high-end. Allen tasted a few bites and then ordered a large portion of barbecue. Then he ate barbecue and listened to the professionals bragging. During the chat, Elu got a lot of useful information, such as the corpse in the evil cave was angry and resurrected again, and the fallen wizard Bishop Oshu had just been killed. These professionals who were mixed in the rogue camp were very well informed. The next day, Allen continued to wander around the rogue camp. Because he didn't go to the training ground yesterday, Allen planned to go to the training ground first today. The training ground was a scene of great enthusiasm early in the morning. These young men were sweating while doing training. After turning around, a heroic woman came towards them. Kasha, the chief instructor in the rogue camp, a powerful Amazon warrior. Kasha held a spear in one hand and a round shield in the other, and there was a long bow on her back. Her black hair was tied up with a ribbon, and there was a scar on her heroic face, but this was not the most eye-catching thing. There was only one breast on her chest, and the right one had been cut off. Breast cutting ceremony. This was the revenge ceremony of the Amazon female warriors after their relatives and friends died in battle. Allen looked at Kasha with a hint of respect. Although her strength was far inferior to Allen's, she was worthy of Allen's respect. "Sir Allen." "Hello." Seeing Allen, Kasha spoke directly. "Do you know me?" Allen asked with some confusion as he looked at Kasha, who was walking over. "No, but I know all the professionals in the entire rogue camp," Kasha said, and Allen clearly felt the vigorous and resolute style of the military in her. "Well, Instructor Kasha, do you have something to ask me?" Ilu nodded and agreed with her statement. "Sir Allen is a powerful professional. I wonder if you need a follower?" Kasha said directly. "Follower? Rogue warrior?" Allen suddenly thought that he could recruit a rogue archer in the game, but the task seemed to be to go to the burial ground to kill the blood crow, and Allen did not complete this task. Allen understood the meaning of followers. In this world, those who fail to awaken can become mercenaries or followers of other professionals. It is not easy to become a follower of a powerful professional. You should know that the equipment expenses of followers are provided by professionals. Many professionals can only maintain themselves, so they naturally cannot afford followers. "Yes." Seeing Allen's expression, Kasha continued, "Didn't Sir Allen promise Sister Akira to help us clean up the monsters around the rogue camp? I'm going to send a rogue warrior who is familiar with the situation to guide you." "I understand. Where are the followers you arranged? Can I see them first before making a decision?" Allen said after a moment of hesitation. "Of course, this is your right." Kasha motioned Allen to follow and turned to walk towards a house in the training ground. This should be Kasha's security room. There are many weapons hanging on the wall. Most of these weapons have signs of wear and tear, and some are even damaged, but they are wiped clean. "These are the weapons that my sisters and I used." Seeing Allen's gaze, Kasha explained, "Some people have died, so I kept their weapons when they were alive." Hearing this, Allen looked at the wall again. There were at least dozens of weapons there. Allen was also a little shocked by the battles this female warrior had experienced. "Wait a moment, I have informed her that she should be here soon." Just as Kasha finished speaking, a crisp voice came from outside the door. "Report." "Come in." A tall figure walked in. Allen looked up and saw that it was the beautiful female warrior named Helen who he met when he came in yesterday. "Instructor, you are looking for me." After seeing Allen, the rogue archer was obviously a little surprised, but he still saluted Kasha first. "Well, Helen, this is Mr. Allen. I'm going to make you his follower. Kasha said. I obey orders. Helen glanced at Allen and nodded. Sir Allen, what do you think of Helen? Kasha turned around and said, Helen is the best of this group of rogue warriors, and she is very familiar with the surroundings of the rogue camp. Okay. Allen nodded in agreement. Since it was a female mercenary with a good figure and beautiful appearance, Allen agreed. If a grown man came to be a follower, Allen would definitely refuse without saying a word. A beautiful female mercenary with a good figure is still very capable. Yes, capable. Since Sir Allen agrees, then from today on, Helen will be your follower. Kasha's expression suddenly became serious, and then handed Allen an agreement, on which Helen swore allegiance to Allen with her life. After signing the agreement, Kasha handed the agreement to Allen. Sir Allen, I hope you can treat her well. I will. Allen nodded in agreement. Helen, take care, teacher. Helen saluted Kasha again. After leaving the training ground, Allen and Helen came to her living camp, because after becoming Allen's follower, she needed to move away from the residence of the rogue warriors. For Helen to become a follower, the other rogue warriors expressed their blessings, especially after knowing that Allen was a powerful professional. They were very envious. You know, the followers of a strong man are often stronger than ordinary professionals. Thank you for the 10,000 starting coins reward from the book Friend Life is Like a Dream, I'm Dreaming, and thank you for the 100 starting coins reward from the book Friends Who Are Lin Mu, and 2017062910033139. Quote. Chapter 454 Cleaning. Speaking of which, the rogue archers are very similar to the elves. They are tall and handsome, and are proficient in bows and arrows. Except for the pointy ears and long lifespan of the elves, everything else is very similar. However, Allen knew that the rogue warriors had nothing to do with the elves. Most of them were Amazon warriors who had not fully awakened. After Allen and Helen packed their luggage, they returned to the hotel where Allen lived and stayed in the room next to Allen. Helen, as my follower, your strength cannot be too weak. You can use these two pieces of equipment first, and replace them when you have better ones. Lou sat on the chair and handed Helen the two pieces of equipment he bought from Kid. As mercenaries, although they have not fully awakened and do not have as many skills and equipment bars as professionals, they can still use some basic equipment. Looking at the faint golden light emanating from the equipment, Helen was stunned for a moment, her eyes fixed on the two pieces of equipment. As a follower, she is very clear about the dark side of followers. Some professionals often use followers as cannon fodder, or let followers cover their retreat in times of danger and escape by themselves. Because professionals are scarce, although such things often happen, they are still not pursued too much, which leads to a high mortality rate of followers. Few professionals will give good equipment to followers, who are like cannon fodder. Take them, they will be yours in the future. Looking at Helen, who was a little dazed, Allen smiled and urged. He learned a lot of things in the tavern yesterday, and he was naturally clear about the affairs of followers, but he had no intention of using followers as cannon fodder. Shouldn't such followers be used to warm the bed? Yes, sir. Helen carefully took out two pieces of equipment, as if she was holding a rare treasure in her hand, which would be damaged if she was not careful. Okay, change it quickly. There will be a lot of such equipment in the future, after you follow me. Allen waved his hand casually, and his expression was as relaxed and casual as if he was talking about two blank outfits. Wipe your saliva, put it on, and remember to hide the light of the equipment, Allen said jokingly. Helen blushed and quickly put on her equipment. Okay, we've been busy all morning, let's go eat first. Seeing Helen wearing her equipment, Allen said directly. The two had a meal in the tavern opposite, and then began to purchase supplies in the camp. Allen was going to clean up the monsters around the rogue camp, and he needed to bring a lot of supplies. Helen knew these matters very well, so in the afternoon Helen took Allen to buy things in the camp. As Helen grew up here, she was very familiar with this place and soon prepared all kinds of supplies. Early the next morning, Allen took Helen away from the rogue camp. They were going to go to the evil cave in the bloody wasteland first. Yesterday, Allen heard that the corpse was resurrected by fire. The evil cave was on the way to the cold plain, so he just cleaned it up on the way. Allen did not take action along the way. Helen, who got the new equipment, would deal with those monsters. In the rogue camp, all the rogues would practice Amazon archery. Because of the imperfect awakening, they could not master all archery skills like Amazon. Rogue Archer only mastered one elemental arrow, while Helen mastered the freezing arrow. With the bright golden equipment in her hand, she was even more powerful. As long as she saw the fallen demons, zombies and other monsters she encountered along the way, she would shoot them into ice cubes on the ground, without the need for a second shot. Helen was very excited to see that the arrows she shot had such power. According to her, these monsters usually needed 3 arrows to be killed in the past. Because they had a map and Helen was familiar with the terrain, the two quickly found the evil cave. Entering the evil cave, Allen clearly felt that the negative energy here was strong. He waved his hand, and a ball of light appeared in the air, illuminating the surrounding 10 meters. Lord Allen, the light will attract monsters to besiege. Seeing Allen summon a ball of light, Helen was obviously stunned for a moment. She had never seen this spell, but then she reacted and said quickly, "It's okay, just some cannon fodder." Allen waved his hand and took the lead. Helen saw Allen moving forward and hurriedly chased after him. The corpse is a zombie boss. This monster moves slowly. In addition to its thick skin and flesh, it is a target. Although as a boss, its speed is a little faster, but its strength is limited. After entering the evil cave, Allen went directly to the place with the most negative energy. As undead creatures, they all like to stay in places with rich negative energy, especially this kind of monster with low IQ. Along the way, they encountered zombies, beasts, fallen demons, and fallen demon wizards, all of which were shot and killed by Helen. Soon the two came to the depths of the evil cave. In a large stone chamber, they found a corpse that had just been resurrected. This is a tall zombie. Unlike ordinary zombies, his skin is dark blue, has frost resistance, and is obviously much faster. However, monsters of this level are still cannon fodder for Allen. Binding spell. A beam of spiritual light shot out and instantly hit the corpse. An invisible force instantly formed a cage to trap the corpse in it. The rest was easy. Helen shot more than a dozen arrows in a row to kill the small boss. When the corpse was burning and died, some gold coins and other things fell out, but Allen's attention was not on this at all. Soul imprisonment. The grey spiritual light covered the burning corpse, and the scattered soul power quickly gathered here, and then a grey soul crystal appeared in Allen's hand. Intermediate soul crystal. Allen pouted and threw it into the storage space, and then began to check the things he dropped. A few small piles of gold coins, a pair of blue boots, and a cracked ruby. Good luck. Summoning the wizard's hand to pick up the things, Allen casually identified the blue shoes. It increases the movement speed. Not bad. You sit first. After taking a look, he handed the shoes to Helen, and then the two left the evil cave. Allen checked the ruby in his hand, which was only the size of a soybean. This gem was of good quality, and contained some magic power. It was a magic gem. After solving the burning corpse, there was no boss in the blood wasteland. The two did not stop, and started to rush to the cold plain. After spending half a day, they arrived at the junction of the ice plains and the blood wasteland at night. There was an outpost set up by the rogue camp, and there were always several rogue warriors guarding here. The two planned to rest here for a night. Chapter 455 Sisterin. The ice plains is obviously much colder than the blood wasteland. It was drizzling when Allen and the others set out. The monsters here are not much different from those in the blood wasteland, but there is a small boss of the fallen demon wizard, Bishoboshu. Unlike ordinary fallen demon wizards, Bishoboshu has the characteristics of flame enhancement, flame immunity, and magic resistance. Moreover, this monster inherited the timid characteristics of the fallen demon, and there is always a large group of fallen demons around him, but this is meaningless to Allen. At Allen's request, Helen took Allen directly to the fallen demon tribe where Bishoboshu was. The area of the ice plains is much larger than the blood wasteland, but after Allen blessed the flying technique, the two flew directly from the air and found Bishoboshu in just 1 hour. This small boss is hidden in a group of fallen demon wizards. This fallen demon tribe has more than 500 fallen demons. Allen directly released a large-scale ice storm from the air. Strong elemental fluctuations enveloped the entire tribe. The group of fallen demons who had not yet recovered were directly frozen into ice sculptures and then shattered into foreign ice chips. With so many monsters dead, a large amount of energy poured into Helen's body. In a moment, Helen even rose to level 10. A flash of inspiration flashed, and the next moment a soul crystal flew into Helen's hand. This was left after the death of Bishop Oshu. It was also an intermediate soul crystal. After throwing it into the storage space, Allen controlled the wizard's hand to clean up the battlefield. Helen, who had recovered, looked at Allen with admiration. She was completely stunned by Allen's power. It's not that she had never seen ice storms before. The ice storms cast by those mages had a very small range, and could only trap 1 or 2 monsters. The spell cast by Allen directly killed such a large tribe of fallen demons. Even the great heroes in the history of the Dark World did not have such great power. After collecting the gold coins on the ground, they got 3 cracked gems this time. After that, the two did not stop and went directly to the underground cave. There was also a cold crow here, and they also got a soul crystal. In the following time, Allen came to the burial ground under the guidance of Helen, and killed the blood crow. The blood crow was a rogue warrior, a follower of Kasha, and also her deputy. The leader of the rogue warriors died in a battle, and was buried in the burial ground. With the erosion of the demonic power, the blood crow was resurrected again, but this time it had become a claw of the devil. After killing the blood crow, Allen imprisoned its soul, and got a high-level soul crystal. Blood crow's painful spirit, high-level soul crystal. This soulless crystal is the product of the blood crow's soul being tortured, after it was corrupted. After Allen destroyed it, a translucent rogue female warrior saluted Allen, and then turned into a star-like aura and slowly disappeared. After she was corrupted, her soul had been devoured by darkness. It was the power of darkness that supported her countless resurrections. After being thoroughly purified by Allen this time, Zuwu was also freed. The only remaining light of her soul was redeemed and returned to the Source Sea. From then on, she would not be resurrected again. He threw a fireball and burned her body. "Thank you," Helen said sadly as she looked at the burned body. Allen touched Helen's head and handed her a pottery jar. After Helen collected Zuwu's ashes, the two set off again. Next, the bone crusher in the great mausoleum, the tree-head wooden fist in the dark forest of Akanishu in the stone wasteland, the blacksmith in the military camp, and the countess on the 5th floor of the underground of the Forgotten Tower. The strength of these bosses was not strong for Allen, and could even be called weak chickens, but there was no high-level soul crystal harvest. There is no other way. These monsters or demons are projections. The demon bodies are all in hell. Killing the projections can only collect some intermediate soul crystals. If you want to get high-level soul crystals, you have to go deep into hell and kill their bodies. However, the bodies of these monsters are not as stupid as the projections. They always stay in a limited area, and their IQ is not as low as the projections. It took Allen 3 days to clean up all these bosses, but the harvest was not bad. It's just that the soul crystal harvest is limited. Allen doesn't plan to continue hunting these monsters in the future. It's a waste of time and the harvest is not beaten. But it can be handed over to others for regular cleaning. After killing these monsters, several bright gold equipment and even green suits dropped. Allen threw them to Helen and asked her to wear them on her body and put away the others. After solving these small bosses, Allen was ready to find Sister Anne. In the game, Allen often came here to have a beneficial exchange with her. Sister Anne was generous. Every time she died, she would leave a lot of good things, including runes, gems, and dark gold equipment. Sometimes some good amulets would drop, as well as some other materials or jewelry. As the biggest boss in the first act, Andariel, she is one of the 4 demons of hell and a subordinate of the 3 giants of hell. She is also called the Queen of Pain. She is an ancient spider demon with 3 pairs of sharp thorns on the back of her body, which can spray spider webs and toxins. If it is her body, Allen speculates that there should be a high-level legend, but Andariel here is just a projection and her strength is not high. Allen and Helen came to the outside of the cathedral. It can be seen that this was a gorgeous cathedral before, with marble-carved stone columns, round domes, and various exquisite stone carvings and murals. Everything shows the former glory of this church. However, after the devil came, the glory of the church came to an abrupt end, and it became Andalia's nest. Pushing all the way, Allen took Helen to the 4th floor of the catacombs. Unlike the upper floors, the space on the 4th floor was not large. In the hall on the 4th floor, a female demon about 4 meters tall was sitting on a huge bone throne. Seeing someone appear, Andalia stood up directly. It must be said that demons have good figures and are dressed boldly. They only have a bikini to cover their vital parts and a mask on their faces. After sensing someone entering, they rushed over directly. Frost cage. Allen waved his palm, and a flash of light appeared. Then a huge frost cage trapped it tightly. No matter how she attacked, it was ineffective. Then ice cones appeared in Allen's hands, and the next moment they pierced Andalia's body. After enduring several attacks, Andalia screamed and died, and a large number of gold coins and equipment gems fell. Soul binding technique. Soul extraction. A purple soul crystal appeared in Allen's hand. High level soul crystal, not bad. Just as Allen killed Andalia, Helen also cleared the other demons around. After collecting the spoils, Allen did not leave immediately. He planned to leave a space coordinate here, build a teleportation array, and then come back after Sister Anne was resurrected. After all, a higher level soul crystal can be produced here every time. The production line of the iron golem has been built, and the first batch of iron golems is about to be completed. There is still a big gap in high level soul crystals, and he will not let go of all the high level soul crystals. After taking out some magic gems and other materials, Allen set up a teleportation array here. Helen, how long will it take for Andalia to be resurrected? Allen asked casually when he saw Helen coming over after collecting the spoils. Andalia is one of the 4 demons in hell. It takes a week to be resurrected after being killed. Helen looked at Allen's actions with some surprise. 1 week, that is 4 pieces a month. The iron golem production line in the floating city produces 10 units a month, and there is still a gap of 6 pieces to maintain consumption. In the future, the iron golem will need to be upgraded, and the gap will be even bigger. Allen calculated and was full of expectations for the remaining big bosses. Chapter 456 Preparation. After the death of Sister Anne, she dropped a lot of equipment, some of which were of dark gold quality. However, since these equipment were unique to the Dark Destroyer God world, Allen did not know whether these equipment would have this property after leaving this world. After all, many of these equipment had the effect of increasing the damage to undead creatures by 50% or 100%. If they still existed after leaving this world, then the equipment here could be called a sub-artifact. Allen tried to wear some equipment. I don't know if it was because Allen was an outsider. Although these equipment could be used, their power was obviously reduced a lot. In addition to the equipment, there were various broken gems. This thing required a special equipment in the dark world, the Heradric Cube, which could combine 3 broken gems into a cracked gem. Then there were 5 levels of ordinary, flawless, and perfect. When killing Sister Anne, a piece of ordinary ruby was dropped. This ruby was already the size of a pigeon egg. In the wizard world, magic gems of this level were already top grade. Most of the magic gems in Allen's hands were of this level. Even if the equipment produced in this world cannot be used, the soul crystals and magic gems alone are enough for Allen to hold on to. After killing Sister Anne, Allen asked the chip to evaluate Sister Anne's combat power. In this underground tomb, Andalia's strength is equivalent to that of a 2nd level wizard. Her greatest attack power is poison damage. Toxin attack belongs to group attack and has strong attack power, which is not weaker than that of a 3rd level wizard. However, she is seriously biased. In addition to poison attack, she has few other means of attack. Although her attack is powerful, her threat will drop sharply after targeted defense. Bring targeted antidote. During the period of toxin immunity, Andalia's attack is not even as good as that of a formal wizard. Any formal wizard can kill her. Resurrection once a week. Allen does not have time to come here every week, so he plans to let the iron golem do it for him. Because the golem is a constructed life form, it is immune to many spells, including mental spells, illusions, mind spells, sleep, paralysis, shock, disease, aging, toxins, instant death, attribute absorption, energy absorption, fatigue, heavy blows, and many other negative states. Therefore, most of Andalia's methods are ineffective against a golem puppet. It only has some of its own attack power. If Andalia's body descends, the steel golem is naturally not an opponent, but here is just a projection that inherits part of its strength. A steel golem can easily press it to the ground and rub it back and forth. However, the energy source of the steel golem has not been solved yet. There is no element pool here. Allen plans to add an energy device to it and then stay here for a long time. After solving Andalia, Allen took Helen to the desert city of Lugaoyan in the east. Helen's 3 views during this period have been completely overturned. During this period, she followed Allen to run around to kill boss. The powerful monsters in her and the professional's eyes before could not last 2 rounds in Allen's hands. The 4 powerful leaders of Hell and Alia only lasted a few times. Now she would not be surprised if Allen took her to beat Diablo and Mephitis. After destroying Andalia, Allen planned to rest here for a night before continuing to move east. At the same time, he was also ready to try whether the blood power could be implanted into the human body of this world. Allen found that the upgrade mode of this world was very good. Although the strength was lower than that of the wizard world and Tibis, it could be upgraded quickly as long as the number of monsters was sufficient. The power of blood will gradually become stronger as the strength increases. If the rules of this world accept the power of blood, then according to the upgrades of this world, the speed of blood decay will be greatly reduced. Allen has a lot of blood, but not many are suitable for Helen. One of the most suitable is the elven blood, which is the most widely circulated blood in the multiverse, except humans, from the highest level ancient elves, high elves, to the current forest elves, wood elves, night elves, etc. There are hundreds of subspecies branches. In the wizard world, there is an elven kingdom, located in the west of the wizard continent, a much smaller continent. It is also the smallest of the 11 continents in the wizard world. It is said to be a branch of the High Elves. However, Allen estimates that their bloodline power has almost declined. There are many half-elf families in the Five Rings Tower, but most of their bloodlines have become thin. Allen has a bottle of moon elf blood in his hand, which is the research material he exchanged from the Academy warehouse. He waved his hand and released Allen's mansion spell, and a gorgeous villa appeared in front of him. As Allen's mobile residence, everything here is carried out according to the standards of the Wizard Tower. It also has a study, laboratory, training ground, etc. But because there is no element pool, many experiments cannot be carried out. Allen plans to install an element furnace or a bioenergy host here. Follow. Allen said to Helen behind him. Originally, Helen had accepted Allen's strength, but the act of carrying such a luxurious villa with her still shocked her from the bottom of her heart. Helen followed Allen's footsteps through a layer of space barrier and entered the mansion space through the space tunnel. This spell was improved by Allen. The original spell was cast at a level 7 and could only be cast by a level 3 wizard. After Allen's improvement, the spell became a 9-ring spell. Although the consumption was much greater, the effect was incomparable. The space created by the original mansion spell was limited and could not be called a mansion at all. Allen brought her all the way to the laboratory here and then said to Helen, "Take off your clothes and lie down." Helen was stunned for a moment when she heard Allen's words and then said shyly, "My lord, are we too fast?" "What's fast? It's been so long and your strength is still so low." "This is to improve your strength," Allen urged. "Okay." Helen took off her clothes a little shyly, then revealed her smooth body, looked at Allen shyly, and lay down. Allen took out some magic stones, placed them on the rune array around the stone platform, and shot a spiritual light to activate the array. After observing for a period of time, Allen has gained a deeper understanding of the rules of this world. If he were to implant blood into the professionals of this world, Allen might hesitate. He is already 70% to 80% sure about mercenaries, like Helen, whose awakening is not complete. Chapter 457 Moon Elf Bloodline. Allen activated the rune array, and then took out a crystal bottle, which contained a silvery viscous liquid. The bottle shook, bringing with it a little bit of elemental light. With a light tap, the crystal bottle disappeared, and the silvery liquid was suspended in the air. As Allen's gestures kept changing, the silvery liquid fell into the rune array. Hiss. It's so cold. It's so uncomfortable. So hot. So swollen. Don't move. Allen patted Helen's perky buttocks, and then directed the power of the rune array to draw some blood from her body. Allen's expression was very focused at this time, meticulously manipulating the fusion of blood. The blood entered the rune array and merged with the silver reliquid, and then the fused blood was re-injected into Helen's body. On the experimental table, Helen's face was flushed, and even her originally smooth skin turned red. Allen took a silver white carving knife and cut a few cuts on her body. An elemental fire was burning quietly in the air. Materials were constantly being put into it and finally melted into a light golden liquid. The light golden liquid was pulled into strands of hair-like filaments, which were wrapped around the silver liquid and merged with Helen's blood in a strange way. Finally, a silver moon appeared out of thin air in the laboratory. The silver moon turned into gorgeous starlight and merged into Helen's body. After completing the blood transplant, the moon elf blood began to awaken, and the surrounding elemental energy spontaneously merged into it. At this time, Helen had fallen asleep. Allen placed some elemental crystals around her, activated the protective barrier, and turned away. This was a transformation after her blood was implanted. With the moon elf's blood, it would take about a whole day. After leaving the laboratory, Allen returned to the study and gently shook a delicate bell. A crisp and pleasant bell sounded. After a while, a clay golem that looked much more delicate walked in. "Make me a cup of tea," Allen said without looking back, and waving his hand. The clay golem bowed respectfully and turned away. After a while, a cup of tea was brought over. These clay golems were specially made by Allen to serve as servants in this mansion. These 2 clay golems were only loaded with the most basic attack methods, while the others were all loaded with various life skills, such as cooking, tidying up, cleaning the room, etc. They are household golems. The cost is a little lower than that of combat golems of the same level, but the cost of the butler golem is far higher than that of other golems. Go to the door of the laboratory and wait for Helen to wake up, then bring her here. Allen took a sip of tea and ordered. "Yes, master." The puppet golem turned and left the study. Allen took out a palm-sized white stone with some strange runes engraved on it. They are the specialties of this world, runes. There are 33 types of runes in the dark world. Legend has it that these runes were invented by ancient mages. No one can make them now. The few ways to obtain them are to drop them from monsters or find them in boxes or secret rooms in some ruins. These runes have a magical power. After being combined according to a certain formula, they will form a rune language, turning ordinary equipment into a powerful equipment. Allen is very interested in this peculiar method and is ready to try to make some equipment. If you understand its operating principle, then when making magic items, you only need to inlay the runestones one by one to get the desired equipment, without the trouble of making runestones as before. Chip. Scan this runestone. A ray of light enveloped the runestone, and then a large amount of data appeared in Allen's eyes. After advancing several times with Allen, this biochip has become more and more powerful with the energy of Allen's soul. Compared with when Allen just crossed over, it is simply the difference between a firefly and a bright moon. As time passed, the huge data stream slowly disappeared. Allen took a deep breath and rubbed his swollen temples. It took a long time for Allen to preliminarily analyze this runestone. Although he has not fully understood its principle, he has already reached a preliminary conclusion. But the result was not good. This runestone was made based on the rules of this world. That is, it is only effective in this world. Once you leave this world, the power of these runes is likely to be greatly reduced, or even disappear directly. In this way, the role of these runestones becomes extremely limited, but it cannot be said that there is no use. After all, this production method is still worth learning from. If Allen can understand the rules of the wizard world, then he can also make some runestones based on the existence of the wizard world. After studying this runestone, Allen also has a deeper understanding of the rules of this world. After studying the runestone, Allen took out the 2 high-level soul crystals he got in this world, and he was going to make 2 steel golems. Although there is no Austrian steel, Allen's private space still has a lot of special steel. These steels are much better than those in the wizard world. Although they are not as good as the battleship steel of the Iron Blood Warrior, they are already very good as the main material of the steel golem. Taking out a piece of steel ingot, Allen used magic to ignite the elemental fire, and then put other materials into it, melting it into a liquid that shimmered with starlight. After fusing it with special steel in a specific way, a piece of Austrian steel was produced. After getting enough Austrian steel, To make 2 steel golems, Allen stopped and started making steel puppets. Because of the production line of steel puppets, Allen was already very familiar with the production method of steel puppets. As a large amount of precious materials were consumed, parts were formed in Allen's hands. Austrian steel is a special steel with a light blue color. It has good magic conductivity and high strength. It is an expensive material. The cost of making a steel golem is not cheap. There are less than 10 senior wizards in the 5 Rings Tower who have the money to make steel golems, and most of them only make 1 or 2. Allen added some mountain copper to the steel golem. This special metal obtained from the kingdom of Poseidon, the god of the sea, can further enhance the spell resistance of the steel golem. Most of the magic gems obtained in this world have also been consumed. The silver white runes in the steel golem are integrated into it, and completely integrated with the elemental fire. Time passed by unnoticed, and when Allen came to his senses, Helen was already standing behind him. "Butler, go make 2 meals. I want to eat grilled dragon breast and honey dragon fruit pudding today." Allen turned around and said, "Remember to use dragon breast made from smorg. I obey your will." The clay golem bowed and retreated. Chapter 458 Dinner. Allen finished making the parts in his hand, then waved his hand to put them away. "How do you feel after waking up?" Allen took a sip of the tea beside him and said, "Very powerful. I feel stronger than Teacher Kasha." "My lord, what's going on? How did I suddenly become stronger?" Hearing Allen's voice, Helen asked hurriedly, with unbearable surprise in her voice. "You should know about elves." Allen put down the teacup and turned to lie on the chair. "Elves? Didn't they disappear a long time ago?" Helen was even more confused when she heard Allen mention elves. The world of Diablo is composed of elves. Although there is no record of elves in the background of the game, there are many equipment names that directly contain the words moon elves, such as Moon Elf's fast longbow. "You are an elf now." Allen leaned back, put his 2 long legs on the desk, and changed to a comfortable posture and said, "Elzan. What? I'm an elf now?" Helen looked unbelievable, and her hands kept groping on her body, as if she wanted to confirm something. "To be precise, it's a half-elf with the blood of the moon elves." Allen smiled and explained, "If you don't believe me, look at your ears. The pointed ears of the elves are their most obvious symbol." As Allen finished speaking, a water mirror appeared in front of Helen. This. Seeing her appearance in the mirror and the pair of ears that were obviously pointed than those of ordinary people, Helen was a little overwhelmed. "Your strength is too weak. I implanted the blood of the moon elves into you." Allen stood up, walked to Helen, and then circled around her. "It seems that the fusion is very good, and there is no rejection reaction. Now your strength should be much stronger than that of professionals of the same level." Although the moon elves are only a branch of the high elves, they are also magical creatures, and have many spell-like powers. As your blood gradually awakens, the power contained in the blood will gradually be mastered by you. Looking at the more beautiful Helen in front of him, Allen nodded with satisfaction. As his first work in this world, Allen has spent a lot of effort. Now it seems to be effective, and more importantly, the blood power has been integrated into the rules of this world. Although the rules of this world, that can rely on killing monsters, to upgrade allow them to upgrade much faster than the wizard world, it also limits their potential while providing convenience. If there is no accident, they will basically never break through the limitations of the world. Pulling Helen, who has not yet recovered, to the restaurant, the clay golem, that has already prepared the food bowed respectfully. This clay golem that Allen used as a butler is different from ordinary clay golems. Its soul core is made of a high-level soul crystal, so it can be instilled with many things. Making magic dishes has also been instilled into its soul core by Allen. But after all, it is a golem puppet, and it has only learned to make a limited number of magic dishes. In front of him is a luxuriously decorated restaurant. The puppet butler is standing by the dining table in a tuxedo. As Allen walked into the restaurant, a beautiful music sounded around. This is the music that Allen asked the mermaid to learn when he was free. After all, with the mermaid's talent, it would be a pity not to sing. The restaurant uses the virtual projection machine made by Allen. This is a combination of projection, storage technology and other knowledge. It can not only store text, but also present the original scene again. Hearing the sound of music, Helen finally came back to her senses, and then listened to the mermaid playing music with an intoxicated face. The table is arranged more like a dinner party, with all kinds of delicacies on it. The most eye-catching one is the charcoal grilled dragon breast in the center. This is made by the last dragon in the Hobbit world. After being carefully cooked by the puppet butler, it exudes a rich fragrance. There are also elemental flames jumping on the dragon breast, which will give you a slight burning feeling when you eat it. This is Alan's favorite dish. Today's dinner is particularly rich. In addition to the charcoal grilled dragon breast, there are also drinks made with bloodthirsty honey, colorful ice cream, and another big meal, honey dragon fruit. This dragon fruit is a delicacy that Alan accidentally cultivated. Its prototype is dragon scale fruit. Because the skin looks like layers of dragon scales, some people call it snakeskin fruit, but Alan thinks dragon scale fruit sounds better and is a more common magical plant. Alan planted a lot of dragon scale fruits in the wizard tower. After optimizing the cultivation, one of the dragon scale fruits planted near the volcano mutated and grew a fruit with a flame pattern. After research, it was found that this fruit tastes good and can enhance the user's affinity for fire element and resistance to fire. As Alan and Helen sat at the table, the music became more soothing. The puppet official gently tapped the plate, and a flame instantly rose from the charcoal grilled dragon breast. The rich aroma of barbecue mixed with the taste of secret sauces made people's mouths water just by smelling it, and their throats swallowed saliva involuntarily. Gulp. Alan looked up at Helen and found that Helen blushed a little embarrassedly. Fire element resistance. A ray of spiritual light was inspired from Alan's hand and instantly sank into Helen's body. Not everyone can enjoy this kind of charcoal grilled dragon breast. Ordinary people will be burned directly if they eat it, and it is possible to be burned to death. With Alan's physical fitness, he is naturally not afraid, but Helen has just merged the blood of the moon elves and has not yet mastered the power. She cannot ignore these elemental flames. Okay, you can eat it. As Alan finished speaking, Helen used a fork to pick up a piece of barbecue, then put some sauce on it, sprinkled spices carefully, and put it on Alan's plate. Alan smiled slightly, opened his mouth and ate it. The charcoal grilled dragon breast, which was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, was gently bitten, like countless bubbles exploding in the mouth, with a slight burning sensation, followed by various delicious sauces, and finally a hot feeling. A stream of heat flowed around the body, and the whole body felt warm, as if soaking in a hot spring. At the beginning, the dragon breasts that Alan pickled weighed 100 kilograms. After pickling, the weight was about 70 kilograms. When cooking, it was close to 100 kilograms. After adding various sauces, this amount was enough for 2 people. Helen, who tasted this delicacy for the first time, no longer had the ladylike image just now, and looked like a greedy cat. There was still some seasoning on her pretty face, but she didn't care to wipe it off at this time. The dragon breasts were marinated with sauces, and then processed in a special way. With the prepared honey, it was simply irresistible. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459 Iron Golem. As the divine dragon blood in Alan's body grew, his appetite became larger and larger. He needed to eat a lot of food every time. Of course, as his appetite grew, the time interval between his meals also lengthened. Alan usually eats once every 3 days. However, Alan was not used to this method. He still followed human habits. After eating a few pieces of dragon breast, Alan picked up a piece of dragon fruit pudding. The dragon fruit was cut into particles and then added to milkshake and honey for mixing. In the middle, chocolate and various fruit cubes were added. Finally, it was necessary to release the freezing ray to freeze it instantly. What was amazing was that under the blue ice layer, there was a layer of flames surrounding the dragon fruit. The flames jumped under the ice and showed no signs of extinguishing. The ice layer above was intact and did not melt. This dragon fruit pudding was invented by the mermaid Selena. It was inspired by the underwater volcano, but Allen felt that her inspiration came more from the two worlds of ice and fire. Allen liked to try this experience with the mermaid the most. A pudding requires a whole dragon fruit. It looks more like a small cake than a pudding. Allen opened his mouth and bit into it directly. The ice layer broke with a light touch, and a mixture of various fruits and honey entered his mouth. The moment it entered his mouth, the various delicious flavors locked by the ice layer burst out instantly, among which the cold and fire alternated back and forth, and dozens of different delicacies blended perfectly together. After taking a bite, Allen couldn't wait to take another bite, and soon a large piece of dragon fruit pudding was wiped out by Allen. Lying on the backrest, Allen closed his eyes and savored it. A warm current rose from his body, and then Allen seemed to have entered the dog days of summer. Then a coolness rose from his stomach, dispelling the dryness and heat, and his whole body was extremely comfortable. This feeling went back and forth several times before gradually disappearing. Allen exhaled with satisfaction, and then slowly opened his eyes. The food on the table had been eaten, and 3/4 of it fell into Allen's stomach. Although Helen wanted to eat more, she really couldn't eat any more. At this time, she was lying on the backrest with a flushed face to rest. Her ruddy face looked delicate and charming, and she looked very comfortable at this time. After all, it was her first time to eat this kind of magic food. These meals made with a lot of rare materials can enhance the physical fitness of the eater, and this increase has no side effects. However, the effect will gradually decrease. After 3 times, it will basically have no effect. It can only replenish energy, or add a state of element affinity and element resistance. Most of the time, it is to satisfy the appetite. Moreover, Allen is very picky about food now. Not only does he require the food to be made of magic creatures, but also requires it to be made in various ways. If it is not done well, he will not eat it. After Helen finished eating the most delicious food she had ever eaten, she gradually felt a burst of hot energy coming from her stomach. The energy began to spread from the inside to the outside, and she felt warm all over her body. As time went on, this feeling not only did not subside, but became more and more intense. Soon her skin turned from white to rose red, and her 2 pointed ears became red. Helen felt that her body was like a furnace at this moment, with streams of hot breath flowing back and forth on her body, accompanied by a burning sensation. At this time, her body was sweating profusely, but it was very good for her. Today's dragon meat feast had another effect. The ice and fire could refine the impurities in the body, activate the blood, and speed up the fusion. Now Helen's state was that the energy would activate the moon elf blood that had been integrated, and once again break all the hidden injuries and impurities in her body, and her body would undergo a transformation. However, the dragon breast feast had some side effects. It could stimulate the hormones of organisms. At this time, Helen's eyes had become watery, and she looked even more lovable. Allen would certainly not miss this opportunity, not to mention that he did it on purpose. Yes, it was intentional. Reaching out and taking her into his arms, Allen disappeared in the restaurant the next moment, and a battle between 2 evenly matched opponents began. In the early morning, Allen came to the laboratory in a comfortable state. He was in a good mood after doing morning exercises just now. As for Helen, she had been tired for most of the night, and was exercised by Allen in the morning. Now she was limp and fell asleep. Allen had already told the puppet butler to send food to her when she woke up, and the study and training ground were also open. After integrating the blood of the moon elves, she needed to learn all kinds of knowledge as soon as possible and become familiar with her own power. In the laboratory, a large number of parts were neatly placed on the shelves. This was the steel golem that Allen was going to make. At this time, the parts of the 2 golems had been completed by 80%, and the main body was nearly completed. So Allen planned to stay here for a few days to build the 2 steel golems and test their combat effectiveness. After all, when the construction was completed, Sister Anne would be almost resurrected. Pieces of magic steel changed their shapes quickly in Allen's hands. As the last part was manufactured, Allen began to build the body and limbs of the golem puppet. This was where the steel golem consumed the most resources. Pieces of magic steel were consumed, and the body of the steel golem slowly took shape. The silver-white steel golem had a layer of light blue light, and then the light converged and became a little dim. There were a lot of light golden runes engraved on it, which looked mysterious and unusual. When the runes were finished, a golden light flashed, and then the light converged, the light golden runes slowly disappeared, and the surface of the iron golem returned to its original appearance. After all the parts were made, Allen began to assemble the iron golem. Tens of thousands of parts were assembled in an orderly manner under Allen's operation. As time passed, the iron golem became more and more complete. When the last piece of armor was completed, 2 iron warriors about 4 meters tall stood quietly in front of Allen. The 2 iron golems looked like future warriors, holding a shield in one hand and a 3-meter long sword in the other hand. The sword body was shining with cold light. The 2 golems not only had powerful physical defense, but Allen also loaded several spell attacks, which could spray poison gas, freezing rays, scorching rays, etc., as well as several auxiliary spells. The moving speed has also become very fast. At least humans can't outrun him, but now the 2 golems are still for show and can't move. Their soul cores have not been placed in them. These 2 golems have been specially equipped with energy equipment, and energy crystals are placed inside, so they can fight without relying on the floating city tower, which is specially made by Allen, in order to harvest soul crystals here. However, considering the damage, Allen gave them the repair technique. As long as they are not more than half damaged, the repair technique can repair them. Chapter 460 Iron Golem 2. Take out the soul crystals that have been made. These are 2 purple gems that look the size of fists. Open the head of the golem puppet. There is a small passage here. The soul core can be placed in the chest. With the soul core placed in the reserved groove, it is tightly connected with the surrounding rune lines. The golem has only 1 step left. Slowly taking a breath, Allen raised his arm slightly, and the artifact staff appeared in his hand. The surrounding elemental particles instantly became active, and a strange energy wave slowly gathered. Activate the constructed life. As Allen cast the spell, the soul wave that was different from normal life appeared in the laboratory. The 2 steel golems trembled slightly, and then came to life. Master. Master. Looking at the squatting steel golem, Allen nodded, and then directed the 2 golems to conduct various tests. After a series of tests, Allen finally breathed a sigh of relief. The 2 golems were functioning normally, and all data had reached the target value, or even exceeded it. The challenge level of the 2 steel golems was above level 15, corresponding to a level 3 wizard, but they had no attack skills at the moment, so Allen just needed to instill them. Instilling skills requires a lot of energy, so Allen took out a large number of magic stones and inlaid them on the rune array in the laboratory. After the last magic stone was inlaid, the array lit up slightly and could function normally. Chip, extract the skills that need to be instilled. Cut along, shield strike, spin, lift, slash, large creature combat methods, ordinary creature combat methods, and flying creature combat methods have been sorted out. As the cold mechanical sound of the chip sounded, Allen opened his eyes instantly, and the whole room seemed to light up instantly. Allen's eyes had completely turned golden at this time, and a large amount of data flowed through his pupils. His expression was indifferent, and there was no emotion in his eyes. A high-handed aura came from Allen, and the staff in his hand shook slightly, and the array under his feet was instantly activated. Start loading data. 2 golden rays of light shot out from Allen's hand, instantly hitting the 2 steel golems. Loading progress 10%, 15%, 20%, 80%, 90%, 95%, 100%. Loading successful. Activate combat expertise. Activate primary physical damage immunity. Activate primary elemental damage immunity. Activate steel body. As the energy slowly dissipated, Allen also returned to his original appearance. As the energy dissipated, all the magic stones in the rune array instantly turned into powder. After successfully loading combat skills, the 2 golems are now truly completed. Waving his hand to put the 2 steel golems into the private space, Allen opened the laboratory door and walked out. A clay golem waiting outside the door saluted. "How is Helen?" "Miss Helen is in the training ground. Go notify the housekeeper and prepare some food." Allen nodded and said. After working continuously for several days, he also felt a little hungry. Soon, a table of rich food was ready. Allen's appetite was whetted. The food on the table disappeared visibly in his stomach. He lay comfortably on the recliner and burped beautifully. He picked up the juice drink and drank it in one gulp. Then he stood up and walked towards the training ground. Next, he prepared to make some fine adjustments to the 2 steel golems. After the debugging was completed, they could be officially used. In the training ground, a beautiful figure moved quickly, jumping, constantly crossing various obstacles, avoiding the attacks that kept appearing. The bow and arrow in his hand did not stop and kept shooting out. Elemental arrows of different colors hit the target one after another, either freezing or exploding, and sometimes even flying out several feather arrows directly. When the figure stopped, all the targets in the training ground were destroyed. Seeing her masterpiece, Helen was also surprised. Since that day, her physical fitness has improved day by day. She can easily shoot various elemental arrows, and they are powerful. She even has many strange abilities. For example, you can communicate with some animals and plants, manipulate some plants, release some simple elemental spells, and become invisible at night. Thinking about it, Helen didn't know what she remembered. Her face suddenly turned red, her eyes were a little blurry, and after a while, she shook her head again and again. When Allen came in, he happened to see Helen resting. At this time, she was only wearing a loose training suit. Because of the intense exercise, the sweat soaked the clothes. The clothes were tightly attached to her body, and the looming was particularly attractive. Allen's anger rose from his dungeon, and he took a deep breath to suppress it. "My lord, you are out." Seeing Allen appear, Helen's eyes were full of joy, but after seeing Allen's eyes, she quickly avoided it, and her 2 pointed ears were red. "Ahem, how is the power of your body?" After turning his eyes back and forth on Helen several times, Ailey finally moved his eyes away. "My lord, I have mastered it," Helen said, suppressing her shyness. "The blood of the moon elves will gradually merge over time. You need to work hard to unleash its power. After this period of explosive growth, it will enter a stable stage. You need to practice more." "Yes." Allen came to the training ground and released 2 steel golems. The 4-meter tall steel golems looked extremely majestic and immediately attracted Helen's attention. Allen then adjusted the training ground to various environments and let the 2 steel golems conduct tests. At the same time, the chip continued to scan and collect data. After a large amount of data was collected and analyzed by the chip, it appeared in front of Allen. 2 3-dimensional virtual golems appeared, and a large amount of data was marked. When Helen saw this kind of steel golem for the first time, her eyes were full of curiosity, but it soon turned into shock, because she found that with her current strength, there was no way to fight these 2 golems except to escape. After completing the training, Allen made some fine adjustments to the 2 golems. After the fine adjustments, the 2 golems operated more smoothly, and their attack actions were slightly improved. After the adjustment was completed, he waved his hand to put away the 2 iron golems. Allen was ready to take a break. The continuous work made him feel a little tired. He flashed and appeared directly beside Helen. Before she could react, he hugged her in the ring. Then the 2 figures disappeared directly. After completing the iron golem, Allen was ready to take a bath and have a good sleep. The time for Andalia to revive again was approaching, and the 2 golems were about to usher in their first mission. After this actual combat training, Allen would take one of them away and prepare to find the next target. Chapter 461, Another Visit to Cisteron. Cathedral, Catacombs, Dark Demons, Pollution Monsters, Skeletons, Zombies, Goat-headed monsters and other monsters are wandering around, and occasionally 2 bosses appear. The resurrection cycle of these low-level monsters is very short, and they will be resurrected again about 2 or 3 days after death. A space crack appeared out of thin air in the open space in front of the cathedral, and 2 figures appeared here through the crack. It seems that Andalia has been resurrected. Feeling the strong evil energy here, Allen seemed to be in a good mood, because he would soon get a high-level soul crystal. Some monsters that sensed the breath of the living began to approach Allen and the others. Frowning slightly, Allen tapped the ground with his staff, and an invisible airwave spread rapidly. The airwave swept everything like a rotten wood, and all the demons and undead creatures that were swept away were swept away. The airwave slowly disappeared, after spreading for more than 100 meters. All the monsters that were swept died one after another, and even some small bosses had no power to resist. The sound of ding dong rang continuously, and a large number of items fell. Most of the dropped items were gold coins, with a few bottles of potions and equipment occasionally, and some broken gems in the grass. Piles of gold coins were scattered around, sparkling in the sunlight. Telekinesis. The strange energy fluctuations flashed and disappeared, and the dropped items around disappeared quickly. I have to say that some spells in the world of Diablo are really useful. It will be much more convenient to pick up items in the future. Seeing that all the items were collected in the private space, Allen thought proudly in his heart. Helen is gone. Reaching out to embrace Helen, a flash of inspiration passed, and the next moment the two appeared on the 4th floor of the catacombs. Catacombs, 4th floor. And Dahlia, who had just resurrected and returned to the material plane, moved her body and began to patrol this territory that belonged to her. Compared with the Abyss Hell, these demons prefer the human world, where there are a lot of human lives, and both their flesh and blood and souls are extremely delicious. Especially those souls who died in pain and were full of despair and hatred. This would make her feel physically and mentally happy, even far beyond the pleasure of mating with other demons. However, the material plane has a great suppression on their original bodies. If their original bodies come to this world, the strength of these demon leaders will be greatly reduced, and they may even be killed by human strongmen if they are not careful. This is not a rumor, but something that has already happened. She clearly remembers the fate of the 3 giants of hell who were expelled to the human world by the 4 demons of hell. They were sealed by the fearless humans, so although Dahlia likes the human world very much, she will not risk coming to the human world in her true body. After Diablo, Baal, and Mephitis came to the human world, their strength quickly depleted, and the Archangel Tyrael handed over the 3 soul stones to humans. The next thing is that the 3 giants are GG. Mephitis couldn't stand it first, and was killed by human mages at some cost, and then sealed in the soul stone. The remaining Baal and Diablo didn't have a good life. Diablo was seized by the Heraldric Mage organization, and was blocked in a small country, and sealed in the soul stone. Only Baal fled back to hell in embarrassment. However, this guy demonstrated to us what it means to die. After returning to hell to replenish his energy, Baal, who felt that he had returned to his peak, came to the human world again in his true form. I have to say, he was very courageous. Of course, this was also because he was too confident, because in the last battle, Baal smashed the last piece of soulstone, thinking that without the soulstone seal, he could wander around the world. He even posed a pose when he met the Heraldric Mage, and looked at the human mage casting a spell with a mocking face, saying that I stand here and don't move. If you conceal me, I will lose. I will burst your broken stone directly. But Baal didn't expect that he would meet a ruthless person this time. No, there are more points than a ruthless person. The ultimate secret of the seal technique, the destruction of the flesh seal technique. The most powerful mage in the human world, Tal Rasha, the magician with the strongest mental power at the time, embedded the soul stone into his body, allowing his soul to merge into the soul stone, and upgrading the defective soul stone into a top level product. The result was that after Baal had arranged the pos, he was directly caught and sealed by this top quality soul stone. Then he and Tal Rasha were sealed in an ancient tomb in the desert. And as the last of the 3 giants to be sealed, his seal was the most powerful. The 3 giants of hell are 3 demons who master the dark rules of this world. They are difficult to kill, because they represent a kind of original power of this world, so they can only be sealed, unless the original power they master is more than others, then they will be killed. However, as the dark side of the world, these original powers will be reunited to form another new demon. Not long after Dahlia was resurrected, 2 figures appeared in a hidden small room deep in the catacombs. My lord, are we going to kill Dahlia again? Seeing the surrounding environment, Helen knew that this was the catacombs that she had been to not long ago. If we don't take action this time, something will solve her. Allen smiled slightly, and then the 2 walked out of the room. The 4th floor of the catacombs is not big. There are many monsters scattered outside the door. Allen waved his hand to release 2 tall steel golems. The 4-meter tall steel golems were even more oppressive in this narrow and dark environment. Facing those monsters that were no more than 2 meters tall was like playing whack-a-mole. One step on them, and they would turn into a pool of mud. The surrounding dark demons were killed and wounded, and the tall bull-headed monsters and pollution monsters were also swept away by them like sweeping garbage. Watching the two steel golems moving forward like bulldozers, Helen's eyes widened, and her seductive little mouth opened slightly, looking like she wanted to take a bite. Allen did it directly. The two followed the steel golems into Andalia's hall, as if they were visiting. At this time, the two golems had already fought with Andalia. Andalia was nearly 4 meters tall, with 6 claws around her body, and she had 2 more claws than the steel golems. However, the battle situation was that Sorcerer, who had an explosive and sexy figure, was pressed to the ground and ravaged by 2 strong men. The picture was like a weak little girl being beaten by 2 muscular men in turn. She was pitiful, helpless, and weak. The picture was too beautiful, I dared not watch it. Chicken, you are so beautiful. Chapter 462 Lugaoian. Andalia's poison damage was completely ineffective against the 2 steel golems. The other claws only scratched the steel golems slightly. There was no advantage in strength. She spit out spider silk to entangle the 2 steel golems, but unfortunately they were directly frozen by the freezing ray, and then they were gently torn into ice slag. Bang, bang, bang. There were several consecutive dull collisions, and the whole deep underground was also trembling slightly, and dust fell from the cracks in the stone. The 2 steel golems raised their iron fists and took turns to massage Sorcerer. Allen felt painful just watching the scene. Poor Andalia, who had just resurrected from hell, was beaten by 2 golems before she had time to vent her power as a demon lord. The huge body was pressed to the ground, and the iron fists fell one after another. The 6 spider legs behind him kept struggling to stand up and resist, but they were suppressed by the steel golems. The surrounding dark demons and undead creatures had already run as far as they could. Those who didn't run had already turned into bone dregs. Bang, bang, bang. The continuous sounds were accompanied by the sound of broken bones. Dark green blood slowly flowed out. Andalia's resistance became weaker and weaker. With the last heavy blow, the solid ground showed spider web-like cracks. Poor Sorcerer trembled and collapsed. The 2 steel golems loosened their arms, and they were bored after venting. Soul binding. A spiritual light shot out from the steel golem, collecting the soul energy that had just escaped from Andalia. Ding dong. With a light sound, a purple soul crystal fell to the floor. Allen waved his hand lightly, and the purple soul crystal flew directly into Allen's hand. Good quality. Allen took a look and took it back to his private space. No one, from today on, you will be stationed here. Every week, eliminate the resurrected Andalia, and then collect the soul crystals and other spoils. I will send someone to receive them at the end of each month. Comply with your will, Master. A dull voice came. Next, Allen collected the other items dropped by Andalia, and then waved his hand to collect another steel puppet. After explaining the matter, Allen took Helen out of the catacombs. Taking out the map, Allen prepared to go to the east of Rogue Camp, which was a desert country, the Pearl of the Eastern Desert Lugaoian. Ilu summoned 2 nightmare warhorses. This kind of warhorse from the lower plane is often used as a mount for higher level death knights. It looks very similar to unicorns, but one is white and the other is black. Many people think that nightmare beasts are the product of the fall of unicorns. This statement is actually completely wrong. Although nightmare beasts are very similar to unicorns, they are 2 completely different creatures. Unicorns have high intelligence. Legend has it that only pure virgins can be favored by them. However, after many years of research, wizards have found that these unicorns are girls who like natural energy or are favored by nature. Unicorns usually live in the forest. Because the horns on their heads are a very precious magical material, they were hunted in large numbers for a period of time. Now, unicorns are rarely seen in the material plane. They now live in heaven, or in the kingdom of the forest lady. The souls of unicorns are protected by nature, and can never fall. The appearance of nightmare beasts is because of the horses that died on the battlefield. Because their souls are full of hatred and indomitable spirit, they are reborn by bathing in magma under the influence of negative energy. They are wrapped in a halo of fear, can breathe flames, and have hot magma flowing in their bodies. This kind of nightmare beast is tireless, fast and can ignore the terrain. Only a powerful death knight can subdue nightmare beasts as mounts. Allen is not a follower of the forest lady, nor is he her believer. Naturally, he cannot summon unicorns, and even some celestial creatures cannot be summoned. Only creatures of neutral or chaotic camps can be summoned. The nightmare beast in front of him kicked its hooves a few times, and the flames on its hooves swayed slightly. It snorted twice. The nightmare beast, which was summoned by force, was very unhappy, and was ready to teach the summoner a lesson after coming here. However, after feeling the hidden powerful dragon power in Allen, it decisively obeyed its heart. Although the nightmare beast is in the shape of a horse, it is a kind of high-level demon. Moreover, the nightmare beast also has a natural ability like the abyss bull and raven. It is said that they used to be the mounts of the god of death, and possessed some of the power of the god of death, the death gaze. It is the ability to make anyone pregnant by glaring at them. No, it is the ability to make anyone die by glaring at them. However, the success rate is very low. It needs to judge several abilities such as will, physique, and spirit, with a probability of about 5%. Allen climbed on the horse, then leaned over to carry Helen on the horse's back, and patted the nightmare beast gently. The nightmare beast snorted, jumped up, and ran out, passing through the dark forest, the Gobi Desert, and the endless yellow sand. Allen and his companions came to the city in the desert Lugaoyan. Lugaoyan was once the capital of the Desert Kingdom. After the invasion of demons, most of the city has been destroyed, and only this former capital still stands in the endless yellow sand. The city wall built of khaki rocks is surrounded by a desolate Gobi Desert. Several poplars grow hard on this Gobi Desert, and there are several sand date trees in the distance. The lonely city stands on the gravel wasteland, telling of endless desolation. On the other side of the city is the sea. This is a port city. It was already midnight when Allen arrived. Without the scorching sun, bustling people came out of the cool houses, and vendors also set up stalls. There was a lively market around. Helen sat on the back of the nightmare beast in a robe that even covered her head. Her graceful figure made people want to guess what kind of beautiful face was under the veil. At this time, the nightmare beast had restrained its strange appearance and looked like a majestic black horse. Allen held Helen and followed the crowd into the city slowly. At the gate of the city were two guards holding spears and wearing chainmail. The guards did not check the people entering the city. Their task was to monitor the monsters in the gravel wilderness and prevent them from approaching the city. Allen walked around the city with a walker. He clearly felt the strong dark power under the city. These dark powers were divided into two parts, one of which was hidden in the city's sewers, and the other was located in the underground of the palace west of Lugaoyan. Moreover, the dark energy under the palace was much higher than the surrounding area. Allen glanced at the palace with a slightly flickering look in his eyes, and then prepared to find a hotel to live in. Chapter 463 Lugaoyan 2. Lugaoyan is a commercial city. It is very prosperous. Merchants from all over the world can be seen hawking their wares here. The residents here are very similar to the Arabs in Allen's previous life. Men like to grow beards, and it seems that these people care about their beards and take good care of them. They are wrapped in white turbans on their heads. Most of them wear loose white collarless robes with large chests and sleeves, like cylinders. Such clothes are very breathable. Rich people like to carry a machete with them. The knife is made of shark skin and inlaid with several exquisite gems. These knives are used for eating and cutting meat. When Allen walked on the street, he found that there were not many women in Lugaoyan. All women were covered with veils, revealing only two eyes. They were covered with a layer of black gauze, and a delicate sachet was hung around their waists. There were some spices in it. The skin that was occasionally exposed looked smooth and delicate. The people here, regardless of gender, age or status, are good at singing and dancing. From time to time, you can see happy residents singing and carrying things on the streets, and even many passers-by will join in. Not far from the palace, Allen and the other man stopped. This was a hotel where merchants who traveled from all over the country lived. Next to the hotel was a tavern, which was opened by the same owner as the hotel. The two sat in the tavern and chatted more to get information. There were many professionals and mercenaries here, and Allen was well informed. Soon Allen got a lot of information about the city. The owner of this desert city was the former king of Lugaoyan, but now the kingdom is a bit miserable, with only Lugaoyan as a city, so the king became the lord. The lord at this time was Jahin. From the chat of these people, it was learned that Jahin's reputation was not good. Rumor has it that he was even licentious. He gathered all the women in the city and locked them in the basement of the palace for him and the nobles to enjoy. On the surface, he was a graceful nobleman, but Allen could guess what he was actually like. Allen had seen the basement of the Lugaoyan palace in the game countless times. That place was a prison where Jahin had sex and pleasure. There were various torture instruments and the bodies of fruit girls and all kinds of dead creatures. According to Jahin's description, the demons from hell slaughtered all the poor girls in a brutal and merciless way, and there were no demons in this basement, but a large number of undead creatures. As for the Gobi Desert outside the city, there were no demons except various insects, beasts, and undead creatures. As a former noble, Allen inherited the memory of that unlucky guy and knew the style of the nobles very well. The words of these residents should be true. The basement of the Jahin Palace is likely to be a place for extreme play and women. In Lugaoyan, the only place Allen can be sure to get the high-level soul crystal is Duriel's room, which has another one of the 4 demon kings of hell, Duriel, the king of pain, who is also known as the little prince of suffering. Duriel is a huge bug, weird and scary. The lower body is like a reptile, and the upper body is a bit like a mantis. It has 2 huge sickle-like arms, a bird-like head, a hard shell on the body surface, and many bone spurs. His favorite thing is to give his prey severe pain, and he likes to torture his prey in various ways. The ability of this demon lord is freezing, and the physical attack is strong. At the beginning, Allen died more than a dozen times in the game to kill this big boss. Every time he went in and drove back to the city directly and then attacked again. After dying, he resurrected and picked up the corpse again and used the corpse running method to consume this boss alive. Duriel's room was full of his corpses. Later, it was discovered that the mage could block the position and then directly teleported to that point with teleportation, and the big bug could be easily and happily killed. But now it is the real world, and the big bug Duriel is not so stupid. It is impossible to defeat him by blocking the position, running corpses and other evil ways. There is no such thing as running corpses in this world. If you die, you are really dead. It is not like a demon. As long as the body is not dead, you can be resurrected. Lugaoyan is the main city of the second act in the game. The most important item in this level is the Heradric Cube. In the game, this item can synthesize many things. For example, 3 small bottles of potions can be synthesized into a large bottle of potions. According to a certain formula, runes can be embedded in weapons and holes can be opened for equipment. However, these equipment will lose most of their power after leaving this world due to rules, which is not very useful for Allen. However, the function of synthesizing gems and potions is still good, but I don't know if this block is still hidden in a treasure chest on the 3rd floor of the Temple of Death like in the game. As for the big boss Duriel in the second act, it will take some effort to find it, because this big bug is hidden in the tomb of Tal Rasha. Because Diablo, one of the 3 giants of hell, escaped from the soul stone that sealed him. In fact, Allen has always been curious about how he escaped. The cage specially made for them was so simple to escape. Wasn't it a waste of effort to seal it at the beginning? After running out, Big Pineapple came to Lugaoyan to find the tomb of Tal Rasha and rescued his brother Baal, then summoned Duriel and left it in that room. If Allen wants to open it, he needs to find the Staff of Heradric. It is the key to open the place where Baal is sealed. This staff left by the Heradric mages was split into 2 parts and hidden. Allen remembered that they were hidden in the Maggot Nest and the Temple of the Clawed VIP respectively, and they needed to be found and reassembled. In fact, Allen has never figured out what those mages were thinking at the time. Since the 3 giants have been sealed, why are there so many clues left? Especially leaving the Staff of Heradric, the key to open the tomb of Tal Rasha, and spending so much effort to build 7 tombs, 6 fake tombs, and 1 real tomb, trying to confuse others. You just find a place to bury it, and then leave no traces. After a long time, even you can't find the tomb, so others can't find it. Baal could only stay in Tal Rasha's body, and couldn't get out. Now, with so many clues left, Diablo can easily find Baal. The big devil has successfully escaped from the seal, and it's your turn to die. Chapter 464, Temple of Death. After a night's rest, Allen prepared to look for the Heraldric Staff and the Heraldric Cube the next morning. But before that, he needed to find the map around Lugaoian. Allen and the others came to Lugaoian's library, which was located next to the palace. It contained a large number of books, and the map that Allen wanted was here. Compared with the magnificent palace, the library looked much simpler. The mottled marks on the walls showed that it had not been repaired for a long time. There were 2 guards guarding outside the library, but looking at their lazy appearance, they were more dealing with errands. Psychic suggestion. A flash of light rose, and Allen threw 2 gold coins to the 2, and then walked into the library easily. After entering the library, the light inside was a little dim, and there was no one at the borrowing office. Allen picked up the catalog on the table and checked it, and found the bookshelf where the map was. Area 3, 5th bookshelf. He gestured to Helen, and the 2 walked directly to the 3rd area. The books in this world are made of parchment, and each book requires hundreds of sheepskins, so the price of books is expensive and the weight of books is also heavy. After arriving at Area 3, the 2 quickly found the 5th bookshelf. There were many parchment scrolls piled up in a mess on the bookshelf, and a thick layer of dust fell on them. Allen frowned, and a flash of inspiration came to him. A breeze blew through the library, blowing away the dust on the bookshelf. Scan the map on the chip. Allen opened the parchment scroll on the bookshelf. These scrolls record the topographic changes in the Lugaoian area over the past few hundred years. Some oases disappeared, and others appeared. The map here records the changes in Lugaoian over the past few hundred years. Who are you? Are you the curator here? Allen looked at the old man in front of him and asked. Allen had already noticed this person when he was searching just now. I'm Deckard Cain, the curator of the library. The old man nodded and said, who are you? Deckard Cain. Allen's eyes moved. This person knew a lot of things in the 2nd act, and he issued all the tasks related to Heraldric. Just treat us as professionals. Allen waved his hand and put the sheepskin map back on the bookshelf, then turned around and said, since you are the curator, you should know some secret things. I want to find the Heraldric Cube. Do you know where it is? Allen looked at the librarian in front of him, and had already released the mental suggestion secretly. Heraldric Cube. Deckard Cain frowned, as if he was recalling something. Yes, Heraldric Cube. Where is it? Allen's eyes lit up. He didn't expect that. He just wanted to ask on a whim, but he didn't expect that this old man actually knew it. Legend has it that the Heraldric Cube is hidden in the Temple of Death, but I don't know where it is exactly, and there are many monsters guarding it. Deckard Cain thought for a while and said, thank you very much. After getting the answer, Allen directly pulled Helen away. What am I doing here? Deckard Cain slowly came back to his senses after Allen left for a long time. My lord, are we going directly to the Temple of Death? Helen asked as they walked. Of course, but we need to find a guide. Sir, the rogue camp is very familiar with the Lugaoian mercenary guild, so we can ask them for help. Helen suggested. But their fees are very high. As long as we can find the things, the cost is not a problem. Gretz, the leader of the desert mercenaries in Lugaoian, is said to have been a sand bandit at first, but no one knows whether this news is true or not. But now he and his mercenaries help Lugaoian resist various monsters, and they are also responsible for guarding the caravans heading to the rogue camp. After spending some gold coins to hire a mercenary named Kaylee, Allen and the other 2 left Lugaoian and entered the gravel wasteland. Sir, don't you ride camels? Horses in the desert are far less useful than camels. Kaylee said hurriedly when he saw Allen and the other 2 riding a black warhorse. There are a lot of gravels in the desert, which can easily scratch the horse's feet, and the horses can also easily sink into the sand. Don't worry, he is not an ordinary warhorse. Kaylee, just lead the way. Allen patted the nightmare beast to make it behave. Just now, he saw Kaylee looking down on him, and he was ready to attack Kaylee. Okay, you are the employer, you have the final say. Seeing Allen's insistence, Kaylee spread his hands and said, then threw off the reins, and rode the camel ahead. Poo-poo, a sound of flapping wings sounded, and several birds similar to vultures flew over. This is a bird unique to the gravel wasteland, a scavenger bird. This bird has large wings, black and grey in color, sharp claws, and a tail like a mouse. It likes to attack with sharp beaks and claws. Once it finds prey, it will pounce from high altitude. Now it is obvious that these birds regard Allen and the other two as prey. Bang, 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 3 consecutive sounds of bowstring vibrations. 4 scavenger birds fell from the sky. Helen turned back and smiled at Allen, then put away the bow and arrow. The Temple of Death is located deep in the desert, not close to Lugaoyan. The group walked along the gravel wilderness into the depths of the desert. From time to time, there were some scavenger birds and big beetles attacking in the wilderness. Those beetles looked like rhinoceros beetles magnified many times. It was pitch black, covered with a thick layer of carapace. The wings on the back were red, and the 2 forelimbs had mutated to resemble a hook-sickle. It looked extremely hideous, and people had no doubt about its destructiveness. This strange insect was called the Water and Fertilizer Warrior by Lugaoyan. Although the name was funny, this monster was extremely annoying. When attacked, this insect would suddenly explode several lightning balls. This lightning ball was not targeted and spread in all directions. It was just because this insect always appeared in groups, so it was very dangerous for ordinary professionals. Helen was very familiar with this insect and would shoot it from a long distance and would not let this insect get close at all. In addition to this thing, there is a green bug called sand jumper that looks like a large flea. This bug is agile and good at jumping and attacking, and its front claws are sharp. Under the harassment of these bugs, the group spent 2 days finally arriving at the dry highlands. The Temple of Death is hidden in this desert. No one knows when this temple appeared, and no one knows who built it. This temple buried in the yellow sand is entrenched in a large number of undead creatures. P.S. Thanks to 201711152031201118, a book friend, for the 500 Kidian coins reward. Chapter 465, Temple of Death, 2. After entering the desert, Allen felt a force of death gathering under the sea of sand. Led by Carrie, the group moved forward into the desert. The weather was hot and the gravel was scorching hot. A sand lizard quickly ran out from under the feet of the nightmare beast. Animals in nature are very sensitive to the threat of death. On a sand dune not far away, there was a corpse lying down. Judging from the attire, it should be a mercenary. After walking in the desert for more than a day, Allen saw an obelisk from a distance. The obelisk was about 10 meters above the ground, and the surface was severely weathered. The patterns and symbols carved on it were completely unclear. "Sir, this is the Temple of Death." Kerry pointed to the obelisk in front of him and said, "The entrance is just below the obelisk. Thank you for your hard work." Looking at the obelisk in front of him, Allen nodded, then took out a bag of gold coins from his arms and threw it directly to him. "This is your reward." "Thank you, sir." Kara's eyes lit up and reached out to catch the bag thrown over, and then he patted his eyes with his hands and smiled. "There are thousands of gold coins in here, which is worth his risking his life to show the way. Are you waiting for us here, or going in with us?" Allen said to Kaylee, who was still holding the gold coins and grinning. "No, sir, I'll wait for you outside." Hearing Allen's words, Kaylee shook his head repeatedly. He knew the horror of the Temple of Death. He didn't know how many adventurers died there every year. "Okay, then you should be careful. If we don't come out in 3 days, you can go back directly." Allen nodded without forcing, holding Helen in one hand, and gently jumped onto the sand. "I'll leave this horse here. As long as you don't run around, he will ensure your safety." After saying that, without waiting for his reply, Allen went straight into the Temple of Death. "The horse protects me? Are you kidding? It's more like I protect it." Seeing the two people walking into the Temple of Death, Kaylee pouted and said. As soon as he entered the temple, Allen felt a strong power of death. Light spell. Allen summoned a ball of light to dispel the darkness around him. "Chip, call up the map of the Temple of Death." A translucent screen appeared in front of him instantly, and a map appeared in front of him. A green light spot on the map was where Allen was. The Temple of Death is actually a maze, built with a lot of rocks. Although it has been buried in the yellow sand for an unknown period of time, it is still intact. Allen walked towards a passage first. Because he had the chip to guide him, he was not worried about getting lost. There were some pictures carved on the walls on both sides of the passage. The style of these pictures is completely different from Lugaoyan. Some of them are like the style of ancient Egypt. There are some inexplicable symbols next to the pictures. Allen took a few glances at these pictures. They are the steps of making mummies, and some are a scale weighing things. Thump, 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 a burst of bone collision sound came, and Allen's eyes looked through the darkness, and saw 5 skeleton soldiers holding bone knives and bone shields coming over. In the air, a fireball appeared out of thin air, and the next moment it directly hit several skeletons. The impact of the flame explosion directly shattered the bodies of the 5 skeletons. It was just that the skeleton had just fallen to the ground, and the next moment it was rapidly reorganized under the influence of a force of death. In a blink of an eye, the skeleton stood up again, and continued to walk towards Allen. Hollow corpse monster. Seeing the skeleton resurrected, Allen instantly understood that there was a hollow corpse monster inside. This is a 3-meter tall mummy, one hand of which was transformed into a sickle. It can revive other skeletons and mummies, and can use evil light bullets and poison gas attacks. This monster has several names: Guardian, Sorcerer, Giant Mummy, Summon Fire Element *3, Spell Extreme Effect. The space barrier was torn apart by powerful magic, and the Fire Element channel was opened. A team of Fire Element appeared in this Temple of Death. The irritable fire element just appeared and rushed directly to the group of undead creatures. With Allen's strength, he can now easily summon dozens of fire element. These fire element are not weak. One by one, the high-level fire element rushed into the skeleton group and quickly burned these skeletons into a pile of ashes. Even if there is a giant mummy, the skeleton warriors who have turned into ashes cannot be resurrected. Commanding the fire element core, Allen pushed forward all the way. During this period, whether it was skeleton warriors, mummies, vampire bats, or giant mummies, they were all reduced to ashes under the attack of the fire element core. Looking at the steadily advancing fire element core, Allen's mental power began to scan back and forth in the Temple of Death. This style of architecture reminded him of one thing. There was a desert pantheon in the multiverse. The style of this desert pantheon was very similar to this place, but this desert pantheon had disappeared a long time ago. The desert pantheon was the most fond of making mummies. They believed that the soul was immortal and the body was the residence of the soul. They also liked to use huge stones to build mausoleum temples, which were very similar to the Temple of Death in front of them. Just as Allen was checking, a group of bats rushed into the fire element, led by a huge bat with a wingspan of more than 1 meter. The giant bat swooped down and directly dispersed a fire element. The flames scattered, and then quickly combined into a smaller fire element. Leader creature. Seeing the giant bat, Allen's eyes lit up, and he stretched out his hand to grab it. The giant bat that had just flown stiffened, and the next moment it flew directly in front of Allen. Not bad. Catch it and use it as an experimental material. After looking at the big bat, Allen waved his hand, and put it directly into his private space. As the giant bat was caught, the remaining monsters could no longer resist, and were burned to ashes by the fire element. The first floor of the Temple of Death was quickly cleaned up by Allen. Passing through the towering stone pillars in the stone chamber, Allen came to a cave entrance. This was the second floor of the Temple of Death. Commanding the fire element core to enter the second floor, following the route on the map, he went directly to the third floor. Groups of skeletons and mummies fell down. These dead creatures could not stop Allen's footsteps at all. In the past, this group of undead creatures relied on their human siege tactics to besiege others. Today, they finally encountered a siege. The fire element's attack was a group attack. Pieces of magic flames ignited this group of undead creatures, and finally turned them into ashes. The mechanisms of the Temple of Death have no effect on elemental creatures. No matter whether it is strong acid, poison gas, or flame, none of them can cause damage to the fire element. These fire element are immune to most physical attacks, and have no vital points. After being dispersed, they will regroup into smaller fire element. Soon under the siege of the fire element, Allen also opened up the second floor of the Temple of Death. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466, Temple of Death. 3. After passing through a burial pit, a large area of corpses that had turned into white bones appeared in front of them. Boom boom, a dull sound came from the side, as if someone entered, and the mechanism of the Temple of Death was activated. The boulder slowly moved away, and a sarcophagus appeared in front of him. Before Allen could get close, the sarcophagus suddenly opened, and a mummy walked out of the sarcophagus. As soon as the mummy appeared, it staggered towards Allen. A row of sarcophagi opened one after another, and a large number of mummies appeared in the stone chamber in a breath. If it was a professional or mercenary who was suddenly besieged, he would most likely die on the spot. It was not enough to just use it to deal with Allen. He commanded the fire element army to rush over directly. These mummies could not last more than a minute, and were burned to ashes. The sarcophagi kept releasing mummies, but they could not keep up with the speed of death. Soon all the sarcophagi were smashed by the violent fire element. Although the power of death here is strong, it has not reached the standard of breeding ancient mummies. If a few ancient mummies appear, Allen may have to work hard. Mummies of this level are just for show. Mummies are dried corpses, which have physical damage immunity and attack with toxins. Melee professions are very difficult to deal with, but they have a very obvious weakness, that is, they are afraid of fire. This kind of dried corpse that has been stored for who knows how many years is the best fuel, which can be ignited at any time. After burning all the mummies, Aelu began to clean up the battlefield. With the telekinesis, he collected all the items around him into his private space. There are many pottery jars and other burial objects in the broken sarcophagi. The pottery jars contain the internal organs of mummies, and occasionally some gold products. After collecting the gold products here, Allen began to collect this stone chamber. Soon he found the mechanism of the stone chamber and gently pushed down the stone. After a rumble, the stone wall in front of him slowly moved away. A huge stone chamber appeared in front of Allen. There were more than a dozen thick pillars in the stone chamber. The pictures carved on the surrounding walls were richer than before. As the door opened, various monsters in the stone chamber were startled. The sound of bones colliding was endless. Mummies staggered to their feet. There were also several giant mummies up to 3 meters high in the corner. The moment they saw Allen, these giant mummies waved bone blades and threw evil light bullets at him. The light bullets hit the energy shield in front of Allen and had no effect. 4 fireballs flew out instantly and hit these giant mummies directly. The magic flames instantly enveloped them and soon turned them into a pile of ashes. Above the stone chamber, a group of mutant bats kept flying. These bats had thin flesh wings, sharp claws, and fangs about 3 inches long. They kept flying and attacking. Helen shot continuously with the bow and arrow in her hand. Ice arrows froze these bats into ice sculptures, and then fell to the ground and smashed into pieces. The fire element army advanced towards the undead creatures like a tide, and everything they passed was burned to ashes. With the last mummy being burned to ashes, the battle in the stone chamber was over. Compared with the 2 floors above, the 3rd floor of the Death Temple is not big. The model of the entire Death Temple is like an inverted pyramid, with the 1st floor being the largest and the 3rd floor being the smallest. Commanding the fire element to continue advancing, they soon arrived at the altar in the Death Temple. After passing through 3 or 4 spacious stone chambers, they walked through several corridors and opened a stone door, revealing a stone chamber the size of a basketball court. 6 stone pillars with a large number of runes carved on them stood in the hall. In the middle of the stone pillars was a large altar. Before Allen had time to see the altar clearly, the resurrected mummy army had already rushed over. Among the groups of mummies, a saber-toothed cat leader covered with blue ice armor was particularly eye-catching. This was the guardian boss of the 3rd floor of the Death Temple, the crazy bloody witch. But Allen didn't see that she looked like a witch at all. She was a leopard girl, and she liked whips. As far as Allen knew, many people liked this leopard girl very much. She had fluffy ears, a seriously foul figure, and she was dressed very frugally. She also had a fluffy little tail trembling behind her. After seeing Allen, the witch rushed over quickly, holding a whip in one hand and a shield in the other, and swung the whip from a long distance. The blocking fire element was directly dispersed by her whip, but she obviously chose the wrong opponent. A huge fireball hit her instantly and blasted her away. Before her body landed, 3 consecutive flaming arrows hit her body. The crazy bloody witch who rushed up with great momentum didn't even have time to hum before she was killed. Seeing the dissipated soul power, Allen tapped his fingers lightly. Soul binding. A grey soul crystal flew into Allen's hand. Intermediate soul crystal. Allen curled his lips and threw it directly into the private space. With the death of the witch, the remaining monsters could not fight against the elemental army at all. Soon all the undead creatures were burned clean by the fire element. Seeing that the hall was cleaned up, Allen's mind moved, and the telekinesis started instantly. He collected all the items in the hall. After cleaning up the battlefield, Allen thought about the altar in the center of the hall and walked over. In the game, the Heraldric Cube was placed in a treasure chest here, but Allen turned over all the boxes around and found nothing except some potions and gold coins. Allen, who did not find the Heraldric Cube, was naturally unwilling to give up. He directly used his mental power and the chip to scan back and forth in this stone room. Finally, after several scans, he found a clue. There were some spatial fluctuations in the altar in the middle of the hall. Allen came to the altar and began to check the altar bit by bit. After careful observation for a while, Allen's mental power finally found a difference in the space here, and powerful mental power surged instantly. The surrounding space was torn apart, and finally after a few seconds of stalemate, the space barrier could no longer withstand it, and was directly broken by Allen. A dark passage appeared in front of Allen. It's poisonous. As soon as he stepped into the passage, Allen retreated instantly. Then a whirlwind appeared, and with a light wave of his hand, it turned into a gust of wind, and blew into the interior of the passage. Soon a dark green whirlwind flew out. After checking again that there was no poison, Allen walked down the stairs. At the end of the stairs was a small stone chamber. There was a coffin in the stone chamber, and there was a powerful force of death. The coffin was carved with gorgeous patterns, and engraved with ancient words. The whole coffin was wrapped in black chains. Chapter 467 Ancient Mummy. Boom. Just after Allen entered, the coffin and the stone chamber began to collapse, and an evil force instantly enveloped the entire stone chamber. You go out first, Allen said with a serious expression. Helen also noticed something was wrong, and nodded to exit the passage. Protection from evil. Advanced mage armor. Advanced acceleration. Several auras rose from Allen's body in succession. Along with the aura of spells, the coffin and the stone chamber suddenly exploded, and an ancient mummy emitting a fearful aura and a blasphemous aura appeared in front of Allen. Alarm. Alarm. Domain power scanned. Scanned blasphemous power. Scanned. Fear aura. At the place where the stone coffin exploded, a 2-meter tall weird mummy roared to the sky, and the legendary domain force field spread rapidly. I never thought that there was a legendary mummy hidden in this temple of death. Allen looked at the roaring mummy with joy in his tone. A legendary mummy means a legendary soul crystal. As soon as Allen finished speaking, the mummy in front of him quickly rushed over. Unlike the slow speed of ordinary mummies, it was quite fast. Accompanied by a huge wind pressure, this ancient mummy appeared in front of Allen. Bang! With a dull sound, Allen and the ancient mummy each took a few steps back. Really hard. Explosion flame *3 Allen pushed the mummy back hard, stretched out his hand and grabbed it, and 3 fireballs appeared in front of him. This compressed explosion fireball was very unstable, and the explosion power was even more powerful. Boom. 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 With 3 consecutive roars, the ancient mummy was directly blown away by the explosion fireball, and the flames rose and directly wrapped it. The ancient mummy roared, and a large amount of black gas instantly emerged from its body, directly dispersing the burning flames. A series of black auras instantly spread from the mummy, and then a large number of undead creatures began to appear. The sand on the floor of the stone chamber churned, and mummies, skeletons and other undead creatures crawled out one by one. The entire stone chamber was filled in a breath. Dragon breath spray. Allen took a deep breath, and then suddenly spit it out. Allen, whose divine dragon bloodline has reached adulthood, can only spit out dragon breath with the power of legendary spells. The cone-shaped dragon breath flame instantly filled the entire room, and a large number of resurrected undead creatures were burned to ashes by the flames. The stone chamber in front of him turned into a sea of fire. The ancient mummy had no room to dodge. The surrounding flames continued to burn it. A large amount of black gas emerged from its body and then surrounded the ancient mummy, isolating the dragon breath flame. The black gas kept making a sizzling sound in the flames. After burning for a while, the dragon breath flame slowly dissipated. Except for the ancient mummy, all other undead creatures were burned to ashes. The ancient mummy was not doing well either. The bandages on many parts of his body were burned, revealing the blackened corpse inside. Elemental domain. A powerful energy burst out of the body instantly, directly tearing the ancient mummy's blasphemous domain apart and rapidly expanding, squeezing the mummy's blasphemous domain back. Destruction sphere. The heart-pounding elemental energy quickly gathered, and various elemental forces such as fire, lightning, and ice were twisted into a black energy ball, and the space around the energy ball was distorted. The mummy, sensing the danger, jumped up and instantly pounced on Allen, wanting to kill Allen directly, but it was still a step too late. Boom. The entire death temple trembled violently for a while, and a lot of sand fell down. The ancient mummy was directly hit by the destruction sphere, and a lot of magic aura submerged its body. As the shaking stopped, the magic aura dissipated, and the ancient mummy with a broken body not far away appeared in front of him. He had eaten 2 9-ring spells, but the ancient mummy still did not die. Although it looked a little miserable, in Allen's perception, its breath was slightly weakened. Roar. With a roar, a large number of jars in the stone chamber exploded, and the things stored inside instantly ignited. A strong force of death gathered, and the wounds on the ancient mummy healed quickly. The originally incomplete body was also repaired under the effect of the black gas. Soon the ancient mummy recovered again. Except for the bandages on the outside of the body being damaged, there were no other injuries. The recovered mummy moved and appeared beside Allen. The bandaged arm with evil aura smashed over fiercely. The attack was much more swift than before. If it were an ordinary spellcaster, he might want to distance himself first, but for Allen, he prefers to fight hard. However, after advancing to the legendary level, few enemies he encountered could withstand his spells, that is, this thick-skinned ancient mummy. A dragon roar sounded, and Allen's arm was directly half-dragonized, and he fought hard with the ancient mummy without showing any weakness. Compared to the ancient mummy, Allen was stronger in both strength and speed. The sound of continuous collisions and rocks breaking came, and the ancient mummy could not take advantage at all, and was beaten back by Allen. The defense and vitality of the ancient mummy were very strong. The black corpse was like rubber when hit. Although it was beaten by Allen, the mummy was still full of energy, and kept trying to fight back. What a trouble. Allen pouted as he looked at the ancient mummy that was beaten away. If he had mastered the divine power, the previous wave would definitely be able to beat it half crippled. The warm-up match is over. Allen's destruction sword. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the void, and the surrounding space collapsed directly. A black longsword appeared in Allen's hand. Looking at the ancient mummy that continued to rush over, he smiled slightly. The game is over. After adding the high-level acceleration technique, Allen's figure was extremely fast, and he appeared next to the ancient mummy like a ghost. The ancient mummy prefers physical attacks, and does not have many spell abilities, such as desecration of aura, fear aura, control, summoning of undead creatures, self-healing, corrosive corpse poison, etc. It prefers group battles, and does not have a spell that can really make the final decision. It is far from being as difficult to deal with as the Lich, but in such a small place, its strength has been greatly increased, and the most important point is that the ancient mummy is quite tough. No one knows how many corpses are buried in this temple of death. It is not a good idea to fight an ancient mummy with summoning abilities here. Under normal circumstances, a complete team is needed to kill the ancient mummy here. The mage is responsible for clearing the field, the warrior is responsible for hard work, and the others assist. With tacit cooperation and carefulness, you can still kill it. Thanks to the book friends Ioju Huateng for the reward of 100 starting coins. Chapter 468, The Radric Cube. Bang! Allen dodged the ancient mummy's dying counterattack, and cut off its body with the sword of destruction in his hand. Under Allen's continuous attack, the powerful ancient mummy finally fell to the ground and died. Soul binding technique. Soul imprisonment. A beam of spiritual light shot out and instantly imprisoned the soul power in the ancient mummy's body. With a sigh that seemed to be relieved, the whole stone chamber shook slightly, and then the ancient mummy's body quickly turned into sand and disappeared. A looming shadow appeared in front of him. It was a man with a heroic appearance and the characteristics of a desert nation. He saluted Allen slightly with his chest, and then turned into a little fluorescent light, and disappeared in front of him. A black soul crystal appeared in the air, and Allen reached out to take it. Legendary soul crystal, this vote is worth it. Looking at the soul crystal in his hand, Allen was in a good mood. Oh, there's something else. After putting away the soul crystal, Allen moved and came to the platform where the ancient mummy's sarcophagus was placed. When entering the stone chamber, Allen felt that there was an elemental fluctuation on the stone platform. Some symbols were engraved on the platform. This was a simple magic circle, arranged according to the earth, fire, wind, water, light and darkness. Allen observed for a while, pressed his palm on it, and then input some magic power into the magic circle. With the input of magic power, the magic circle was triggered. With the sound of a click, a hot white light began to emerge around the stone platform, and several thin lines appeared on the stone platform that was originally integrated. The thin lines divided the stone platform, a lot of sand fell, and a box slowly rose from the stone platform. Seeing the box, Allen's eyes lit up, and he quickly reached out to open the box. A box the size of a third-order Rubik's Cube appeared inside. The box was bronze, and each side was carved with exquisite patterns. Pradic cube. The moment he saw the metal box, Allen recognized this thing. It was a heraldic cube. After taking the cube in his hand, Allen probed into the box with his mental power. Inside the box was a space, which was empty, and about 1 cubic meter in size, divided into 12 equal small spaces. Just after Allen took out the heraldic cube, a large amount of quicksand poured out from the surrounding walls and soon submerged the stone platform. Allen did not stop, and left the stone chamber. After Allen left, the stone chamber was soon completely buried by quicksand. After getting the heraldic cube, the purpose of this time was completed. Seeing Allen coming up, Helen immediately rushed over. "My lord, you finally came up. There was such a big noise inside just now. I was worried to death." While counting his hands, he kept checking Allen to see if Allen was injured. "I'm fine." Allen patted her perky buttocks and lowered his head to say a few words in her ear. Helen's jade-like face instantly flushed red, and then she glared at him fiercely, but this look looked like seduction, no matter how you look at it. "Okay, the matter is done. We should go." The two returned along the original path. Because there were no mummies blocking the way, the return speed was very fast. It took more than an hour for the two to see the sun again. Outside the Temple of Death, the original entrance was a mess, with sandworms and mummies everywhere. The nightmare beast stood aside and ate leisurely. The guide Kaylee was very servile to brush the nightmare beast's fur, and respectfully put various things to the nightmare beast's mouth. When Allen and the others appeared, Kaylee was feeding it a piece of barbecue. After sensing Allen's breath, the nightmare beast snorted and rushed over directly, rubbing its head against Allen. Okay, I know you are obedient." Allen rubbed its head and pushed it away. "My lord, you are back." Kaylee saluted respectfully. "Well, what happened here?" Allen asked after looking at the messy camp. "It's like this. Half a day after you entered the Temple of Death, the monsters in the surrounding deserts began to besiege this place. Fortunately, your BMW is here, otherwise I would never have seen you back," Kaylee said respectfully, praising the nightmare beast. The nightmare beast next to him snorted proudly and kicked his hooves at Allen a few times, as if to say, "These monsters are not enough for me to step on. Praise me quickly." "Okay, you have done a good deed." Allen looked at the cute nightmare beast with a smile, and then threw it a low-level soul crystal. The nightmare beast jumped up and swallowed the soul crystal in one gulp. As a kind of demon, the nightmare beast also likes to devour soul crystals. Rioting half a day after entering, Allen thought about it. At that time, he was fighting with the ancient mummy. The influence range of that ancient mummy is so large. It was also him who pushed from the first floor to the third floor and cleared all the skeletons and mummies. Otherwise, it is estimated that when fighting with the ancient mummy, the undead creatures in the entire Temple of Death would be controlled by it. But since it was solved, Allen stopped thinking about it. He was going to test the newly acquired heraldic cube to see its magical power. Because it was getting late, everyone camped here in the Temple of Death, but they needed to change the place. The ground was full of mummies and the corpses of various sandworms, and the smell was not very good. After camping again under a leeward sand dune, Allen took out the Heradric cube, took out 3 broken rubies, put them into the Heradric cube, and then used magic to activate the cube. A faint spiritual light flashed, and Allen extended his mental power into it. A cracked ruby was quietly placed in a blank space. Seeing that the cube was effective, Allen's eyes showed joy, and then he put 3 bottles of life potions, 3 bottles of magic potions, and an ordinary gem into it. He activated the cube again, and a faint spiritual light flashed, and a large purple medicine bottle appeared inside. Full recovery potion. Seeing the big purple bottle appear, Allen was excited. The full recovery potion can restore 100% of life and magic power in the game. This potion is fine in the game, but if it is in the real world, this thing is a bug. Especially the stronger the strength, the greater the effect of this thing. Allen is now a legendary wizard, and is about to advance to the high level legendary level. His own magic power is even greater. If he wants to fully recover it, he will spend at least half a day just by meditating. If this big purple bottle has the effect in the game, it is equivalent to a life, and belongs to a strategic resource. With a flash of inspiration, a fist-sized purple crystal bottle appeared in Allen's hand. He moved his fingers slightly, and opened the bottle. With a light flick of the bottle, a drop of purple liquid flew directly into Allen's mouth. Chapter 469. Heradric Cube. 2. Chip, monitor my physical condition. After the purple liquid entered, the chip's scanning state was turned on, and a large amount of data flowed in front of Allen's eyes. Active substances were found. Cell activity was activated, and mental activity was activated. Physical strength recovered quickly, and mental strength recovered quickly. Allen exhaled and slowly opened his eyes. He had just tested the big purple bottle himself, and he had to say that this comprehensive recovery potion was really good. After chip analysis and calculation, this comprehensive recovery potion can restore all magic power at once for wizards of level 3 or below, and physical injuries will also recover quickly. For level 4 wizards, it can also restore 30% of magic power, which means that this bottle of potion can quickly restore 30% of Allen's magic power. This potion is an instant recovery. Although it can only restore 30%, it is already very powerful for legendary wizards. The recovery potion in the 5 Rings Tower can basically only restore 2% minus 5%, and it is still a slow recovery. This comprehensive recovery potion can also restore physical injuries at the same time, but this potion cannot be taken continuously. After taking the potion, resistance will be generated, and taking it again in a short period of time will have no effect. After getting the effect of the potion, Allen put away the large purple bottle in his hand with satisfaction. Next, Allen began to synthesize gems. During this period, a large number of broken gems fell. Allen synthesized all of them. After several synthesizers, the first perfect gem appeared. This is a perfect purple gem. The gem is the size of a fist, crystal clear, and of extremely high quality. It reflects colorful light under the sunlight and looks extremely beautiful. The magic power contained in the gem is also very pure. This is a perfect magic gem. In the wizard world, such a perfect magic gem costs about 800 magic stones. Magic gems have an irreplaceable role in many alchemical experiments, which cannot be replaced by artificially synthesized gems. After synthesizing the first perfect gem, Allen synthesized all the gems he collected, and soon got more than a dozen perfect gems. A perfect magic gem requires 81 broken gems to synthesize. In addition to these functions, the Heradric Cube can also synthesize equipment, but the effects of these equipment are only effective in this world. The power will drop sharply when leaving here. For Allen, it is just a chicken rib. The most valuable thing about this block is the synthesis of potions. For legendary wizards, this life-saving potion is extremely precious, and the legendary wizards are rich enough, so the price of the full recovery potion can be imagined. Allen can already imagine the scene of a large group of legendary wizards being ripped off by himself. After the experiment, Allen received the Heradric Cube in his private space, and the next preparation was the big bug Dareel. Like Andalia, Dareel, one of the 4 demons of hell, will also drop the soul crystal. According to the strength calculation, it should also be a high-level soul crystal. The ancient mummies in the Temple of Death are not demons, so they will not be resurrected after death. So this legendary soul crystal is just a one-time deal. Next, they need to find and kill Daryl, and then leave another iron golem there. Kill it every time it is resurrected to collect soul crystals. If it is the same as Andalia, then Allen can harvest 8 high-level soul crystals in a month. A iron golem production line can produce 10 iron golems a month, plus Allen's previous inventory. It can be produced for a period of time. After a night's rest, the group continued to move forward. This time the goal is the Maggot Nest. The Maggot Nest is located in the east of the Dry Highlands, the distant oasis, which is already deep in the desert of Erinoch. This used to be the territory of the Kingdom of Erinoch. In ancient times, Erinoch was a desert kingdom, and its territory included the current Lugaoian. However, in ancient times, due to the invasion of the 3 demons, this ancient kingdom perished. After the 3 demons were sealed, this desert was revitalized again. It used to be a prosperous trade route. A large number of caravans rode camels across the desert to Lugaoian. The oasis that Allen was going to was once an important transit station. It was located about 300 kilometers northeast of Lugaoian. This oasis is the largest oasis in the entire Erinoch desert, and was once a paradise for the desert people. The trees are lush, the lake water is sweet and delicious, and there are tracts of Saxal forests. For merchants who are tired from the journey, this oasis is an important transit station. It is the only way for caravans from the east and the west. However, after the Dark Wanderer, the incarnation of Diablo Pineapple, passed by, everything changed here. The oasis was eroded by the power of hell, the lake began to dry up gradually, the trees died, and the sandworms and scarabs in the desert also mutated. They grew to human size, and their reproductive capacity was terrifying. Their personalities became extremely violent, and began to actively attack humans. It was already evening when the group arrived at this oasis. When the lake dried up, the desert quickly eroded the oasis. Now it has become a piece of yellow sand. The dead tamarisks and poplars stand crookedly in the desert like hideous ghost claws. But a noisy sound rang out, and a black cloud approached quickly from a distance. Allen turned his head and looked. Those black clouds were not black clouds, but were composed of countless black locusts. This creature was just an ordinary locust before. After the oasis was corrupted by evil forces, these locusts also mutated, and they were constantly bloodthirsty. They also carried curses and diseases. They were killers that people in the desert were afraid of. Killed by sandworms, beetles, and scavenging eagles, they could leave some bones. Travelers and mercenaries attacked by this kind of locusts would have no bones left. Accompanied by a buzzing sound, groups of locusts quickly approached Allen and his friends. For Allen, who had intensive phobia, this kind of thing was the most annoying. Fire cloud spell. Extreme spell effect. A large fire cloud suddenly appeared in the sky. After the locusts approached, it was directly ignited with a boom. The fire cloud continued to spread and swallowed groups of locusts. The locusts made a crackling sound when they were burned. The locusts realized that something was wrong and wanted to hide, but it was too late. The fire cloud spread quickly, and it grew to hundreds of square meters in a breath. Then it quickly advanced, and a large number of burned locusts fell one after another. The sand was soon covered with a layer of black substance. The locusts that were all over the sky just now were swept away. After killing these locusts, the group entered the oasis. The location of the Maggot Nest was 3 kilometers north of the oasis. Chapter 470 Maggot Nest. The entrance to the Maggot Nest was built on a slightly arched mound in the desert. Without Carrie as a guide, this inconspicuous cave would be easily overlooked. Leaving the nightmare beast and Carrie outside, Allen summoned the light spell and the two entered the dark Maggot Nest. The Maggot Nest was dug by mutated sandworms. Sandworms are arthropods with 8 legs and a team of sharp mouthparts. They have strong digging ability. After mutation, their mouthparts have become larger and more powerful, and a hard shell has grown around their bodies. And they can spit out highly corrosive venom. They have dug out an underground kingdom like a maze under this desert. I don't know if there is another ventilation hole. The air in the wormhole is still fresh. The temperature in the cave is several degrees higher than the outside ground. Many small scorpions and desert gophers have made their homes here. Seeing creatures breaking in, these desert natives fled in panic. Allen frowned. There were many piles of mucus in the passage. This was the secretion of the sandworm, which looked extremely disgusting. In the game, you can often find some gold coins or equipment in these slime piles. If you are lucky, you can even find gems and runestones. However, Allen has no intention of stepping on those disgusting slime piles here. The maggot nest is interconnected and has many forks, like a huge maze. There are not only sandworms here, but also mutant scarabs and black locusts. However, there are not many other two monsters. Allen's goal is to find the Staff of the Radric. In the game, the wooden handle is hidden in the third floor of the maggot nest, but the Queen of Sandworms needs to be killed. He waved his hand to summon 4 bone demons. These high-level undead creatures that have advanced from skeleton warriors are quite powerful. Although they are not as strong as Death Knights, they are not much weaker. There are many worms in the nest, and Allen does not want to do it himself. The 2 ways of attack of sandworms are toxins and giant claws, which have no effect on these bone demons. The only thing Allen needs to do is the black locust. After going deep into the wormhole, Allen realized that he had underestimated the complexity of this cave. The 9 bends and 18 turns were not enough to describe this cave. The feeling here gave people a completely identical illusion. Coupled with the dark environment around, it was easy to be trapped in it. If Allen's mental strength was not strong and the chip had not scanned the entire wormhole, it would not be easy for him to find things in this maze. This place is indeed the base camp of the sandworms. The bodies of mercenaries and travelers dragged down from the desert surface by the sandworms can be seen everywhere. At the end of each passage is a spacious insect breeding room, which is filled with dense sandworm eggs and hatched larvae. Those eggs that seem to be beating like a heart and corpses wrapped in mucus are disgusting. Firewall. Allen waved his hand and directly turned this insect breeding room into a sea of fire. Bang, 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 continuous explosions sounded, which was the sound of sandworm eggs bursting. Sandworms kept rushing out of the sea of fire, and then were cut into 2 sections by the bone demons guarding them. Some other sandworms popped out of the ground, and Helen shot her arrows immediately. The freezing arrows instantly froze them into ice cubes, and then they shattered into ice chips with a snap. Allen tapped the ground with his staff, and a yellowish-brown aura quickly spread out with Allen as the center. The sand in the passage turned into rocks in an instant, and the sandworms that wanted to get out of the ground were directly wrapped by the rocks. Several were even stuck in the rocks. The bone demon rushed over quickly and killed them. A buzzing sound came from the passage behind, and a large group of black locusts rushed over from the other side of the passage. Fire cloud spell. Groups of fire clouds rose up, and then advanced along the passage, swallowing all the black locusts behind, and then continued to spread into the passage. As the firewall gradually extinguished, all the sandworm eggs in the breeding room were burned to ashes, and the bodies wrapped in mucus were also burned to ashes. After all the sandworms were killed, Allen came to the entrance of the 2nd floor of the maggot nest. With the bone demon opening the way and Allen's firewall cleaning, all the sandworms were killed, and the breeding rooms were destroyed one by one. Under the guidance of the chip, they advanced to the 3rd level of the nest. As they went deeper, more and more sandworms appeared. The narrow passages were often blocked tightly by sandworms, and Allen had to blast them open with fireballs. Fortunately, Allen used mud to turn into stone to reinforce those passages in advance. Otherwise, with the power of fireballs, it would directly cause the nest to collapse and bury Allen and the others here. As they went deeper, the temperature in the wormhole became cooler and cooler. Allen and the others entered the 3rd level of the wormhole. After reaching this level, the number of breeding rooms increased, and many leader-level sandworms appeared. Allen found a lot of things in the sand rooms at the end of some passages. Various goods, boxes, and some equipment. These things should be the goods of professionals and the caravans in distress. The things were scattered and piled up. It should be that the sandworms threw the useless things here after eating the corpses. Controlling the wizard's hand, he opened the box inside. There were food, cloth, gold coins, and even Allen found a few ordinary gems, but most of the boxes were useless goods. The mucus of the sandworm is corrosive. These things are piled in the sandworm's nest, and many of them have been corroded beyond recognition. With a thought, he collected the valuable things such as gold coins and gems, and then threw a flame. The flame spread instantly after it touched the boxes, burning the surrounding corpses and debris into ashes. The winding passage slowly converged, and more corpses were encountered on the road. At this time, the width of the passage has more than doubled. On the map, scanned by the chip, the front is the deepest part of the maggot nest. The various areas on the map are densely covered with red dots, and there is also a largest red dot, which should be the biggest boss in this maggot nest, the sandworm queen who drills the ground. According to the chip scan, this place is more than 1 kilometer away from the surface desert. In front of us is the mother nest of the sandworm. The area of this mother nest is somewhat amazing, a full 1,000 square meters. There are many stone pillars supporting the nest. Inside is a layer of green mucus covered with dense sandworm eggs. The whole nest looks more like a breeding center. Countless larvae crawl around inside. The yellow-green eggs beat like a heart. From time to time, a sandworm egg will burst, and several larvae will crawl out of the eggshell. The incubation period of these eggs is surprisingly short. Every minute, a large number of sandworm eggs will burst around, and a large number of larvae will crawl out. Chapter 471 King's Scepter. The surrounding fungal blankets were wrapped with many rotten corpses, and a large number of larvae were lying on the corpses and eating. Allen frowned as he watched. With such a reproduction speed, it was no wonder that these sandworms could occupy this desert. When he saw the sandworm queen, although he was mentally prepared, Allen was still a little surprised. Helen was even more shocked by the huge body of the sandworm queen. It was an ugly and disgusting giant worm. Its khaki body looked seriously out of proportion. Although the front half was exaggerated, it was not much different from ordinary sandworms. The only difference was that its body size was magnified 5 or 6 times. The focus was on the lower body of the sandworm. Its lower body did not have a hard shell, but an exaggerated abdomen. The abdomen of the sandworm queen was more than 10 times the size of its body. It looked like a khaki meat mountain. Under the meat mountain, sandworms lined up to move the eggs they laid, because the abdomen of the sandworm queen was too large to move at all. The mother worm laid eggs at an extremely amazing speed. In just a few minutes, the sandworm queen laid hundreds of sandworm eggs. The queen of sandworms swung her giant claws and continued to eat. A team of sandworms was responsible for sending the corpses of various creatures to her mouth. After the food was digested, it was sent to her abdomen through the yellow intestines, and eggs would fall from her reproductive opening. Although he understood that this was the way the Zerg reproduced, Allen still felt sick. Firewall spell * 5. Extreme spell effect. He waved his hand to summon the firewall spell to cover the entire mother worm nest. A large number of larvae were burned by the flames, and soon there were bursts of explosions. This was the sound of the sandworm shell bursting. The sea of fire wrapped the queen of sandworms. The pain of being burned by the flames made it hiss continuously. The huge mouthparts sprayed out a group of venom. The venom made a sizzling sound when it hit the sea of fire. As the venom and the flames offset each other, the flames around the queen of sandworms gradually extinguished. Seeing this situation, Allen waved his hand and directly ordered the surrounding bone demons to attack. 4 bone demons jumped several times in the sea of fire, raised the bone blades in their hands, and stabbed at the abdomen of the queen of sandworms. This is the only area where the queen sandworm is not covered by a shell. When the bone demon approaches the queen sandworm obviously senses danger, and her huge mouthparts make an unpleasant hissing sound. The surrounding sandworms keep rushing up to besiege the bone demon. At the same time, more sandworms rush towards Allen and the others. These sandworms drill into the sand, avoid the sea of fire, and drill directly out from the ground of the passage. Earthquake. A yellowish brown spiritual light spreads, and the sand around Allen suddenly ripples like the surface of water. The sandworms hidden in the sand are instantly killed by the shockwave, and large patches of green blood seep out from the ground. The bone demon is an undead creature, and the toxin damage of the sandworm is completely ineffective. The only trouble is the acid, which is very corrosive, and can corrode the bone armor on the bone demon. A large amount of acid sprays out from the queen sandworm's mouth, and the bone armor on the bone demon makes a sizzling sound. Some places have been corroded, and white smoke is emitted, and the bones, that are as hard as fine steel, have turned gray. However, these injuries could not stop the attack of the bone demon. The sharp bone blade pierced the abdomen of the sandworm queen fiercely. Chiji. The painful sandworm queen swung her huge mouthparts, and the huge force directly smashed a bone demon away. The huge body like a meat mountain trembled violently, and the sharp hissing sound pierced the eardrum. The remaining 3 bone demons slashed the bone blade fiercely, cutting an exaggerated cut in its abdomen, and sticky and disgusting green mucus flowed out of the wound. The severely injured queen twisted her body frantically. A large amount of acid sprayed out of her mouth like rain, and more than a dozen large serrated pincers surrounded the 3 bone demons. Allen frowned. The hissing of the queen made his eardrum slightly sting. Seeing that the bone demons failed to quickly deal with the sandworm queen, Allen waved his staff. Earth Spike. Extreme spell. 1 by 1, half a meter long ground spikes pierced out from the soft abdomen of the sandworm queen, instantly tearing her abdomen completely apart. Green mucus splashed everywhere, and sharp insect chirping continued. As if receiving some order, all the sandworms rushed towards Allen regardless of everything. Flamastorm. A firestorm appeared in the queen's nest with Allen as the center, and then quickly expanded, sweeping up all the sandworms that rushed up. Flames flew everywhere, pieces of meat flew everywhere, and acid splashed everywhere. The entire sandworm nest became a living Shura field. Under Allen's swift and fierce attack, the huge queen finally lost its breath, after holding on for several times. The surrounding sandworms also suffered heavy casualties under the ravages of the firestorm. The remaining fish that escaped the net were quickly harvested by the 4 bone demons. When they came to the queen of sandworms, this behemoth was already dead, only the body was still twitching from time to time. The body was pierced by sharp spikes, and became riddled with holes. A large amount of toxins and green mucus flowed out, and the huge abdomen shrank. Gently knocked the hard shell of the queen of sandworms with the staff a few times. These shells were almost intact under the attack of the bone demon just now, and they were also resistant to spells. They were good materials. Commanding the bone demon to dismantle the shells and put them in the private space, Allen began to look for the accessories of the heraldic staff. The queen's nest is very large. Under the scanning of the chip, Allen quickly found a box with an exquisite appearance under the sand. Gently knocking on the ground, the sand layer cracked, and a metal box appeared in front of him. Opening the box, a wooden handle about 1 meter long was quietly placed inside. King's Scepter. This is the name of this handle. It is an accessory of the heraldic staff. Together with another VIP amulet, it is synthesized into the heraldic staff with the heraldic frame. Reaching out to take out the staff, there is a warm feeling after holding it. It feels very comfortable to touch. It is hard to tell what kind of wood it is made of. The staff is bare and there is no rune on the surface, but Allen feels that this staff contains a strong magic power. After cleaning up the battlefield, Allen left the maggot nest with the spoils. Once again back to the ground, the next goal is the Temple of the Clawed Viper. The Temple of the Clawed Viper is located in the far north of the oasis. You need to pass through the Lost City and the Snake Canyon, deep in the Snake Canyon. In Lugaoian's legend, the Lost City was a prosperous city a long time ago. The people here believed in the sun god. In order to worship the sun, they built a magnificent temple in a Shangshan Valley. It's just that I don't know when the city was abandoned, and everyone disappeared without a trace. A group of clawed VIPers who came out of nowhere occupied the temple. Thanks to the 2 book friends Loi Fan Sheng and Ping Heng Zhao do 984 for the reward of 100 starting coins. Chapter 472, The Erenoch Empire. Kerry, tell me what you know about the Lost City, Allen said casually. Okay, sir. Kelly pulled the reins and let himself walk parallel to Allen. According to legend, this city is the capital of the Erenoch people. A long time ago, the powerful Erenoch people established a powerful empire on this land. This country is rich and powerful. They have their own pantheon. The highest god is the sun god. They believe that the sun god created the world. In addition to the sun god, the most important is the god of death. The Erenoch people believe that death is not the end, but to return to the kingdom of the underworld gods to continue living. They believe that the soul is immortal, that the present world is temporary, and the afterlife is eternal. The underworld is the reappearance of the mortal world, and death is the continuation of life. After a person dies, the soul will return to the original body. Making mummies is to allow the immortal soul to retain a complete destination. Death is not a terrible thing for the Erinoch people, because they believe that the afterlife will be happier and better than the present world. Because everyone wants to live a better life in the underworld, the Erinoch people pursue lavish burials. Even ordinary people will try to bring rich burial objects after death. Therefore, there are many tomb robbers who specialize in robbing the tombs of the Erinoch people. In order to protect their burial objects, the Erinoch people often set up many mechanisms, traps, and even vicious curses. Legend has it that the Erinoch people built a city of the dead, which was full of gold, but until today, no one has heard of anyone finding that city. Do you know how the Erinoch people disappeared? Allen thought for a while and said, I don't know about that, but it is said that they disappeared for hundreds of years. Kaylee shook his head. How long will it take to reach the lost city? Climb over this sand dune and walk about 50 kilometers ahead to reach the city. Seeing Allen lost in thought, Kaylee did not dare to disturb him and continued to lead the way. Interesting, this Erinoch person is very similar to the desert god system I saw in the information. Allen thought to himself. In the multiverse, the desert pantheon disappeared long ago. Although the gods are immortal, many pantheons have been dying out in the struggles of history. The desert pantheon is just one of them. According to the information obtained by Allen, at least 5 pantheons have died out. However, Allen is not sure whether the gods of these pantheons have fallen, or whether they have shifted the focus of their faith to other material worlds. In the dry desert, Allen and his group walked along the sand dunes. Just as they were about to leave the oasis, the sky suddenly darkened. Eclipse. Allen looked up and saw a black shadow appearing on the bright sun. The shadow quickly expanded and gradually swallowed the sun. The earth began to become dim and fell into darkness within half an hour. As darkness fell, Allen clearly sensed the increase of dark forces around him. It should be the Temple of the Sunday. Seeing the eclipse, Allen thought in his heart. Allen summoned the light spell and continued to walk for a distance before finally arriving at the city that was about to be buried by the wind and sand. With the help of the light spell, Kaylee led the group to continue northwards to the Snake Canyon without stopping here. As darkness fell, various monsters began to appear. Tall sand knights wandered in the ruined city. Sand knights are a kind of skeleton warriors with a height of more than 2 meters. Unlike ordinary skeletons, these sand knights have 4 arms, each with a cheap bone blade. The sand knights attack very quickly, and they also have an aim, the 4-sword flow of sand. Because of the loss of the sun, these dark creatures lost their suppression, and their strength has obviously improved. After sensing the breath of living things, they rushed here quickly. Summon fire element. Extreme spell effect. The powerful elemental power directly tore open the space barrier. The fire element channel opened, and a team of tall fire element came across. The fire element summoned this time were all giant fire element, each of which was more than 3 meters tall, and they had a crushing advantage over these monsters. The irritable fire element directly pounced on the various undead creatures and mutant monsters that surrounded them. The fire element with a crushing advantage easily burned these monsters to ashes. Commanding these fire element to push forward, the group quickly passed through the ruined city and came to the killing canyon. The dry air was filled with a fishy smell, and the strong wind passed through the canyon, mixed with a series of sharp whistles. This is the Snake Canyon. Because of the special terrain, the wind often whistles when it blows. The surrounding walls are severely weathered. The environment here is harsh and few plants can survive here. Because there is no sunlight, the entire Snake Canyon is even more eerie and terrifying. Coupled with the sound of the wind passing through the canyon, it is more like a howling of ghosts and wolves. Kaylee, the leader of the team, has trembled in his legs. If he didn't know that leaving at this time would die faster, he would definitely flee without hesitation. With the help of light magic, the ruined temple, collapsed stone pillars, weathered rocks, unknown skulls, and the dark temple entrance were found in the canyon. Everything here looks like the entrance to hell. On the severely weathered ruins, Allen saw a sun emblem, and he knew that the Clawvipir temple was here. Swishing, the sound of sand and gravel rubbing against each other was heard, and a yellowish-brown monster with a snake head, a human body, ferocious claws on its arms, and a snake tail dragging down its body swam towards the light. The fire element that cleared the way slapped it directly, and the clawed VIP was wrapped in flames and flew away without a hum, struggling to turn into a charred corpse. There has always been debate about the origin of this ferocious monster. Some scholars believe that these clawed VIPs are snakes living in the desert that have mutated under the power of the three demons. There is also a saying that these monsters were originally the missing Erinoch people. Because these clawed VIPs have a human body, and after the Erinoch people disappeared overnight, monsters like the clawed VIP soon appeared here. And this monster also likes to entrench itself in the temple of the sun built by the Erinoch people. They believed that these Erinoch people were killed by the three demons and turned into these hideous monsters. After all, in ancient times, the Erinoch people were the main force against the three demons. These people were fearless and caused great harm to the three demons at that time. However, whether they were once Erinoch people or not, they are now enemies of mankind. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473 Sun Altar. After passing through several collapsed stone pillars, a 6-foot high stone gate appeared on the mountain wall behind the ruins. Next to the stone gate stood two statues of the Erinoch people. These statues held bows and arrows and had sun emblems on their bodies. They were the guards of the sun god. Entering the temple along the weathered steps, some snakes and scorpions rustled and ran away. Compared with the outside world, the stench here was very strong. Summon fire element *3, spell extreme effect, summoning the fire element legion again. Allen began to walk towards the Claw VIP temple. This temple is very similar to the architecture of the Death Temple, with 4 passages in front, back, left and right. Allen, who had experienced it once, directly commanded the fire element to push forward. There are not many kinds of monsters in the temple. In addition to these claw VIPs, there are various mummies. Like the Death Temple, the giant mummies can use evil auras, spit poison gas, and resurrect other mummies, but they have no other new abilities. There are a lot of exquisite murals on the walls of the temple. However, perhaps because no one has protected them for too long, many of the murals are in ruins. The most common mural is the sun god, who holds a snake staff with a goshawk standing on it, and a sun behind him. Most of the murals here are called the legend of the sun god. Allen found that there was an image of a sharp-clawed VIP on one of the murals. In the murals, these sharp-clawed VIPs appeared from a canyon and then attacked villages and cities everywhere. Many places were destroyed and turned into ruins. In order to eliminate these monsters, the sun god sent 7 of his warriors. These 7 warriors killed the sharp-clawed VIPs, closed the cave entrance, and built a magnificent sun temple on the cave entrance. Seeing this, Allen has figured out that this temple was built to suppress the sharp-clawed VIPs. It was just that after the Erinoch people disappeared, this sun temple was also abandoned, and the temple that lost maintenance was once again broken by the sharp-clawed VIP. Now this temple that originally suppressed them has become the nest of these monsters. Warning. A large number of monsters are approaching. The cold reminder sound of the chip rang out, waking Allen up. On the scanning map of the chip, there was suddenly a dazzling red light, followed by numerous dense red dots appearing in front of him. Hiss hiss hiss, accompanied by waves of strange snake sounds. Countless snakes crawled out from the cracks around them. They rushed towards Allen and the others at a rapid speed, like a black tide with the breath of death. These snakes had red eyes, flashing a faint red light in the dim temple, and bypassed the fire element army in front of them through the gaps, trying to besiege Allen. This is a bit interesting. Seeing the group of snakes surrounding him, Allen's expression remained unchanged. He lightly tapped the staff in his hand, and a wall of fire emerged. These snakes are a kind of pit VIP unique to the desert. The surface is a mixture of black and yellow patterns, and they are very toxic. At this moment, they have no biological fear of fire at all. They are not afraid of death and rush into the flames. Suddenly, a burnt stench permeated the passage. There were many snakes. After the fire element and the firewall attacked, tens of thousands of charred corpses were left behind, and the snakes were finally killed or injured. After cleaning up the snakes, Allen continued to command the fire element to advance. After cleaning up the first floor of the Claw VIP temple, Allen came to the entrance of the second floor located deep inside. The second floor of the Claw VIP temple is not big. There is only one hall. The hall is crowded with densely packed Claw VIPs. The fire element army that came in before has fought with the snake monsters guarding the hall. In the middle of the hall, Allen saw the altar surrounded by 7 stone pillars at a glance. The altar was surrounded by black mist, and a golden light penetrated the black mist. Next to the altar, a huge snake monster that was much larger than an ordinary Claw VIP was hissing and commanding other Claw VIPs to attack. This Claw VIP was black and purple all over, and its eyes flashed with a fascinating red light, looking extremely ferocious. Yappy Claw VIP leader. As if sensing Allen's gaze, the VIP turned its head, its long tongue flickering constantly, staring at Allen with cold eyes. It looked creepy, but Allen, who had seen all kinds of terrifying monsters and demon lords, didn't take the little snake seriously at all. Although the sharp-clawed VIP looked scary and had a huge body, it was nothing compared to those demon lords. Facing Yappy's cold gaze, Allen threw a fireball at him. As if sensing the power of the fireball, Yappy opened his mouth and let out a sharp hiss. Several sharp-clawed VIPs around him flicked their tails and jumped high, blocking directly in front of Yappy. With a loud boom, the fireball exploded, and the brave sharp-clawed VIP was burnt to ashes, and the shockwave generated by the explosion overturned the surrounding monsters. Ice storm, extreme spell. The freezing cold suddenly descended. Countless ice crystals appeared out of thin air, and then quickly spun, tearing a large number of sharp-clawed VIPs into pieces. The hall on the second floor of the temple entered the ice age in the blink of an eye. The temperature of the entire hall dropped rapidly, and a large number of ice crystals were suspended in the air. Although the sharp-clawed VIPs are much stronger than snakes, they still have the characteristics of snakes. This creature is also a cold-blooded animal. After the surrounding temperature drops significantly, the body will become stiff and quickly enter hibernation. In the sudden attack of the ice storm, all the sharp-clawed VIPs were unable to resist. Their bodies quickly stiffened and were scratched by countless ice crystals, and soon they were broken into ice chips on the ground. The leader of the sharp-clawed VIPs only held on for a little longer, and was also frozen, and then snapped and shattered into countless ice chips. Even the fire elemental army summoned by Allen was greatly affected. Only half of the 3-meter-long body was left, and the flames on the body became dim. Allen interrupted the summoning spell, and these fire element instantly dissipated and returned to the elemental plane. He waved his hand to disperse the ice storm, and the temperature around him no longer dropped. He waved his hand and a ring of flames swept across, melting the ice and snow. Allen came to the altar in the center of the hall. There were a lot of runes carved on the 7 stone pillars around the altar. The image of the stone pillars was 7 warriors. These warriors should be the guards sent by the sun god in the mural. Allen observed for a while, and found that the altar could summon the power of the sun. This should be the power of the Erinoch people, but this power is about to dissipate. With the help of these powers, the sun's brilliance is obscured. A ray of spiritual light shot out from Allen's hand, and the black fog shrouding the altar was directly dispelled. A dazzling golden light burst out from the altar, instantly illuminating the entire hall. Chapter 474 Harrison. After breaking through the black fog, 1, 2, 3, a large number of light spots broke free from their restraints, and then gathered into a ball of light. The last beam of light shot up from the altar, and disappeared in an instant. After the golden light burst out, it slowly dissipated, and the altar became empty. As the golden light dissipated, the altar, which had lost its power, began to fall one by one, and turned into rubble in a breath. The 7 stone pillars also turned into sand. At the same time, in the world outside the temple, all the creatures on the dark continent saw the vision in the sky. A ray of sunlight cut through the thick black curtain like a sharp sword, dispelling the darkness. The darkness that enveloped the entire world for several days quickly dissipated in the sunlight, and the light shone on the earth again. Bathed in the sun again, the people who had lived in darkness for several days became ecstatic. They walked out of their homes and spontaneously came to the square to cheer for the sun in the sky. Soon a grand celebration ceremony was formed spontaneously. The residents of Lugaoyan felt that the sun in the sky that they had cursed countless times was so kind. From this day on, all residents of the Dark Continent regarded this day as the Day of Light, to celebrate their regaining light. On the other side of the strait, when the sun shone again to dispel the darkness, a traveler in a grey robe stretched out his dry palm and quickly put on his hat. His strange eyes revealed his extreme disgust for light. Behind him, the huge dark power was recovering rapidly. This person dressed as a wanderer was the god of fear, Diablo, who had just rescued Baal and was still recovering his strength. Diablo first turned his head and looked in the direction of the Claw-Vi-Pyr temple deep in the desert. An angry expression appeared on his hideous face, and then he pulled his hat together and continued to move forward. After the light of the altar faded, Allen walked to the original place of the altar. There were more than a dozen pieces of metal foil quietly scattered on the ground. Allen stretched out his hand and grasped it, and more than a dozen pieces of metal foil flew into his hand. These are things unique to the world of Diablo, amulets. This is a product based on the rules of the world of Diablo. You only need to wear it to bless various powers, and there is no limit. As long as you can carry it, you can have as many as you want. However, these are not ordinary amulets. These things called Vi-Pyr amulets are actually the patterns on the heraldic staff, which is also one of the purposes of Allen's coming here. After putting away the amulets, Allen began to harvest the spoils. These clawed Vi-Pyrs dropped a lot of things, with gold coins being the most, followed by various red bottles and blue bottles. All potions were collected. These are the materials used to synthesize full recovery potions, and there are some magic gems. In addition to these, there are a lot of things left by the Aeronoch people. As a temple for worshipping the sun god, there are many gold products here. The Aeronoch people think that the light reflected by gold is closest to sunlight, so all the utensils used to worship the sun god are made of gold. In the past, this temple was occupied by clawed Vi-Pyrs, and countless tomb robbers died here. Allen found a lot of bones along the way, and those were tomb robbers who came here for these gold. In addition to gold, there are gems. Among these sacrificial objects, Allen also harvested 2 flawless rubies. This kind of fist-sized ruby is rare. It should be a sacrifice to the sun god, but now it all belongs to Allen. After collecting the spoils, the two left the Claw-Vi-Pyr temple. Next, Allen placed the king's scepter obtained from the maggot nest and the Vi-Pyr amulet he just got into the synthesis space of the heraldic cube, and then started the synthesis. A strange energy wave flashed, and the two things disappeared. A gorgeous staff appeared in the heraldic cube. The staff is about 4 feet long, with a crown on the top and a triangular spear at the bottom. There are some uneven patterns on it. This staff is the key to open the real Tal Rasha tomb. Back then, Tal Rasha used his body to seal Baal, the god of destruction, and then buried him in a secret place. He built 7 ancient tombs, 6 fake and 1 real. This staff is the key. In the basement of Lugaoyan's palace, there is a mysterious shelter, which was left by a wizard 1,000 years ago. At that time, Lugaoyan belonged to the fortress of Festuli. The chief of the Festuli magician family was a powerful magician named Summoner Harrison, who once summoned and enslaved demons. He used those demons as slaves. Although he was a powerful summoner, he was not immortal. In his later years, because he was afraid that the Lord of Hell would punish him for enslaving demons, this powerful wizard created a mysterious shelter for himself. He believed that his shelter could protect him from the punishment of hell. But in the end, he still did not escape the search and temptation of the devil of hell. In order not to be troubled by time and disease, and continue his research, he sold his soul to the devil, and was willing to work for the devil. The fallen wizard Harrison made many magical divination tools, and found the Warlock Canyon, where the 7 ancient tombs of Tal Rasha were buried. Allen needed to find it to get the specific location of the Warlock Canyon. According to legend, the Warlock Canyon is deep in the desert, and was closed by the ancient wizards after they buried Tal Rasha. Allen didn't want to run into the desert to search bit by bit, so finding Harrison was the best way. After coming out of the Claw-Vi-Pyr temple, Allen used the teleportation array directly from the depths of the desert to return to Lugaoyan. At this time, the port city was still in the celebration of the Day of Light, and there were people singing and dancing everywhere. After losing the sun once, People regained light again, and they needed to vent. The grand celebration also affected Allen. Allen, who had not participated in such a festival for a long time, was dragged by Helen to dance in the crowd. Because he had been in the desert for half a month, Allen also felt that he needed to relax and change, so the two followed the celebration parade to play. The 3-day celebration came to an end, and Lugaoyan resumed his normal life again. Allen was also ready to go to the palace, to find the mysterious shelter hidden in the basement of the palace. When he came to Lugaoyan's palace again, the palace was still heavily guarded, and several guards were guarding the door. In Allen's mental perception, there were many breaths of undead creatures in this palace. It seems that the king of Lugaoyan is not living a good life. Allen showed a hint of sarcasm, and glanced at the magnificent palace. Chapter 475 Mysterious Shelter. As a local lord, Jahane has always lived a very carefree life. Although he is not a professional, and does not have strong strength, he is a nobleman and the lord and ruler of Lugaoyan. This rich commercial city brings him huge wealth every day, enough for him to squander. Young people like women, so Jahane invited all the prostitutes and dancers in Lugaoyan to his palace, and built a gentle country in the basement of the palace. He originally thought that he could live like this until he died, but one night, such days ended. There was a terrifying sound in his gentle country in the basement, and then undead creatures continued to pour out of the basement. In order to conceal this matter, he could only let the guards block this place and resist more and more undead creatures. However, as time went by, his guards were short of manpower, and Jahane had to go to the mercenary union to hire a large number of mercenaries to help guard. Allen came to the gate of the palace, cast a mental suggestion, and walked in with Helen. Then he walked directly to the area with the strongest undead breath. The basement of the palace, the gentle place of Jahane, the residence of the women, has now become a paradise for monsters. A large number of fortifications blocked the passage. Because the monsters did not attack at this time, there were only a few people on guard here, and Allen easily entered the basement. In the basement, the light was a little dim. There was a thick carpet on the ground, and the surrounding decorations were extremely luxurious. There were exquisite murals on the walls, and the surroundings were decorated with gold foil. The pillars were inlaid with crystals and tortoises. The whole room looked extremely luxurious. But now this, once luxurious palace has become a sure field. There are dried blood stains everywhere on the ground, and the bodies of the fallen guards are entangled with undead creatures. The exquisite murals on the wall were also stained red with blood. Chip, scan the surrounding environment. A translucent map appeared in front of Allen. This basement is very large. Following the map marked by the chip, Allen began to walk inside. Soon, they went down a staircase to the second floor of the basement. As soon as they entered here, Allen found a lot of interesting things, such as iron cages, whips, chairs tied with belts, ropes, and all kinds of things that Allen had seen, and had never seen before. After Helen looked at them for a while, she suddenly seemed to understand something, and her pretty face, as smooth as jade, turned red. Just as Allen was observing various torture instruments and preparing to learn, a fireball flew over. After the fireball hit Allen's body 3 feet away, it went out with a puff, followed by a click sound like a high-heeled shoe. Then the firelight found that a row of skeleton warriors rushed here. What a disappointment. Allen frowned slightly, then snapped his fingers, and a series of ice cones flew directly over. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of ice breaking sounded continuously, and several skeleton mages shattered into ice chips. After dealing with these skeleton mages, the two did not stop, and followed the instructions of the chip, and went directly to the 3rd floor of the basement. The 3rd floor of the basement is the dungeon of the palace. It is divided into many small rooms. Allen didn't have the energy to search bit by bit, so he used spells to clear the area. A powerful magic power was brewing in Allen, and the magic element around him became extremely active. Even the space around Allen was distorted to a certain extent. Soulstorm. The powerful mental power swept out with Allen as the center. The powerful mental power directly tore the souls of the undead creatures apart. The soul fires in the heads of the skeleton wizards, skeleton warriors, and plunderers flickered twice and all went out. The bodies made of bones were directly scattered into a pile of dry bones. The mental fluctuations expanded rapidly, and all the undead creatures swept by the mental power extinguished their soul fires, and their bodies turned into a pile of bones. Some other demons also had their brains directly stirred into a ball of paste under the impact of the mental power, and then bleeding from all 7 orifices, and their bodies fell limp to the ground. This soul storm swept the entire 3-story dungeon, killing all the undead creatures and demons. A large amount of scattered power gathered on Helen. In the blink of an eye, her level was raised again, and the blood of the moon elves became stronger. Telekinesis. The things that fell around were instantly collected. After dealing with the monsters and demons here, Allen walked towards the depths of the dungeon. In the deepest part of the dungeon, Allen found a hidden space door, which was the portal to the mysterious shelter of Harrison. He walked to the portal, and checked the space teleportation array. Allen easily activated it, and after injecting magic power into it, a dark blue space door slowly opened. When the space power no longer fluctuated, and the portal returned to stability, Allen took Helen, and went straight through. Like rippling water, the two appeared in a starry sky. This was a strange place. All the buildings were platforms and passages, and occasionally there were some small attics. The passages extended in all directions, and the space was extremely wide. After the chip scan, it was found that this was a subspace hidden in the plane shield. This subspace was very simple. Apart from some platform channels, there was nothing else. There was no foundation of material plane such as plants, water, soil, and wind. Through the space barrier, you could see a starry sky. The simple stone platform channels were connected to each other, and a large number of demons were wandering around. What a simple subspace. Allen observed for a while, and said with a pout, "It has not been perfected for thousands of years." Allen was very familiar with the subspace. Among the subspaces he entered, this one could be said to be the simplest one, giving people the feeling that it was just a matter of coping. Legend has it that this was a mysterious shelter built by Harrison to avoid the devil of hell, but in Allen's view, it was simply a fool's dream to want to stop the 3 giants of hell with a shelter of this level. The only land in the shelter was these platforms and channels under your feet. If an ordinary professional came in, he could only honestly search along the channels bit by bit. The channels here could only accommodate 2 people in parallel. All the channel platforms were suspended in the void. If you didn't have the ability to fly, you would fall into the void if you left the platform. However, this environment was not difficult for Allen. With his profound knowledge of space magic, he could easily transform this place. He could also ignore the maze-like terrain and cross it directly. Turning on the chip scan to the maximum, Allen reached out and put his arm around Helen's slender waist and then flew out directly. The corridor of the mysterious shelter connected 4 directions, and Allen chose one of them to start searching. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.